Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by Transrelational Healing and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Before we get started, I wanted to let everybody know that my new book, The Understanding Narcissist Volume 1 of the series of On Narcissists that I am creating, is available on Amazon and on my website. There is a link in the information section of this video. So if you want to pick up your copy of that today, please use that link to do so. Today I wanted to talk about something that is unfortunately very important to understand when dealing with narcissists, and that is gaslighting. Gaslighting as a thing is everywhere now. Most people have at least somewhat of an idea about what it is, and it's much better understood than it used to be, so we won't go into a long definition of what it is. Suffice it to say that gaslighting is strictly defined as the intentional denial of another person's reality with the intent of confusing them or making them feel or appear crazy. This definitely is something that happens in real life, but strictly speaking, most intentional gaslighting does not fall into this category. Most intentional gaslighting doesn't have this much complexity or intentionality behind it. It's really just a very primitive form of lying, where someone is not even able to come up with some kind of convincing story or whatever, so they simply deny things outright because they don't want to face consequences for whatever it is that they've done, or to take responsibility for whatever it is that they've said, etc. It's definitely intentional, but the goal isn't as thought out or malevolent as the definition of gaslighting generally requires. Gaslighting can occur in any situation with any kind of person, but it's extremely common with narcissists. When dealing with narcissistic personalities specifically, there is also a phenomenon that we could call unintentional gaslighting. This is where the narcissist is denying, reframing, or misconstruing things because that's what they really believe happened. We call it unintentional because it's not necessarily being done on purpose, but it's still gaslighting in the sense that the effect on the victim is still the same. Narcissists don't live in the same reality that everybody else lives in. They really don't. Their perception is legitimately affected and distorted, often extremely affected and distorted. They generally don't see things or people the way that they actually are, including themselves. They generally don't experience things the way they actually happen. They're not listening. They don't pay attention. They can't understand what other people are saying, nor can they see beyond their own feelings and conclusions to understand anything else. This is a person who truly does not see things the way that you do. And this is much, much more than just a difference of perspective or looking at the same things differently. They genuinely do not see what other people see. They genuinely do not experience what other people experience. They genuinely don't think what other people think. They don't come to the conclusions that other people come to. Because of this, gaslighting from narcissists is different. It's a lot more than just intentional lying and denying. It is a completely immersive experience where someone is consistently and relentlessly inundated with information that does not match their lived experience. This is not just someone lying and denying or making up things that drive you crazy. As horrible as that is, and as much as that may actually be going on at the same time too, when you're dealing with a pathologically narcissistic personality, you're dealing with someone who is not having the same lived experience that you are having, even when you're both existing in the same place together. This means there is never a break from the effects of gaslighting because this person genuinely believes things are happening differently than you do and is asserting this different reality into the situation nonstop. It is not something that only happens sometimes. It's not something that even has an angle or a motive behind it all the time. It just is. And it never stops because it is their actual lived experience as they're perceiving it. The damage and confusion that this ever-present assault on reality can inflict on people really cannot be overstated. It probably can't even be adequately explained in a way that people who have not experienced it can really understand. The effects of this constant conflict with someone's lived experience with their reality can be devastating, especially for children. It can leave people completely confused and unsure about what is actually happening. Even strong people who are very grounded in reality can be affected eventually. It's extremely damaging to have someone continuously and consistently reframing, rewriting, and reimagining every single thing that happens in life, particularly when it's all being reframed, reimagined, and rewritten into the narrative that they are the bad guy or the idiot or the abuser or whatever the negative thing is. This is something that differentiates narcissistic abuse from other kinds of abuse. It differentiates narcissistic gaslighting from other people. Narcissistic abuse isn't just whatever kind of abuse that happens to be perpetuated by narcissists. Narcissistic abuse refers to the type of abuse being perpetuated, not who it's being perpetuated by. And it means that the victim's ego, their literal sense of self, is being attacked and abused. Victims of narcissistic abuse are consistently, relentlessly told that they are someone other than who they actually are. They are interacted with and reacted to as if they are someone other than themselves, as if they are somebody that they're not. They are constantly told that they think, feel, believe, do, and say things that they don't. No amount of denial, explaining, or proof changes that. Whether positive or negative, victims are never seen for who they are at any time. And the reality that the narcissist is continually asserting about the victim does not match objective actuality or lived experience in any way. This is the type of gaslighting that victims of narcissistic abuse are subjected to. It is a relentless assault on their reality, personhood, and sense of self that literally never stops because they're dealing with someone who has a flexible relationship with the truth, to put it lightly, and who, even when they're not consciously lying, cannot seem to perceive things accurately anyway. It's just not a sustainable situation in any way. It really isn't. This person is simply not living in the same reality that you are, and this does not change, which means it never stops. When we say it never stops, that's not a metaphor. It's not hyperbole. It is the literal reality. Dealing with a narcissist is dealing with someone who is perceiving and understanding virtually everything that happens completely differently than you are, to the degree that they may even believe things happened when they did not. They are delusional in this sense, and you cannot have any kind of relationship or even a conversation with someone who's in a different reality than you are. That is the biggest reason these relationships can't work, and many people don't understand how serious this situation really is. Even if the narcissistic personality were not constantly trying to punish others, to control others, and to force their own negative feelings onto those in their environment, which they are, the situation is still not sustainable because this person cannot see or understand things and people as they really are, and this is not something that can be overcome or worked around somehow. Reality has to mean something. Otherwise, it's like living in a cartoon where normal laws of reason, logic, and physics just don't apply. But beyond that, even, it is dehumanizing to never be seen for who you are, to never matter in any way, for someone to refuse to allow you to have your own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, for someone to continuously force words into your mouth, for someone to tell you who you are, what you think, what you feel, what you said, what you meant, what you believe, and then to be called a liar, laughed at, scorned, dismissed, ignored, attacked, and whatever else the narcissist does every single time you try to assert these things for yourself. Even if a narcissist never succeeds in convincing the victim that they in fact are a bad person, the pain and stress of constantly trying to be seen and heard, of constantly trying to defend yourself against utter nonsense for no reason beyond some idea in somebody's head, of constantly trying to anticipate how and by what this person will get hurt or insulted or offended, all of these things get to anybody eventually, and it doesn't usually take very long in most situations due to the intensity and the continuous nature of the gaslighting here. Even if someone is never convinced that they're a bad person, they eventually get exhausted by the situation and they become tired of being treated this way. A considerate, decent person cannot stand up against this anyway because by default, they will make serious attempts to understand where the narcissist is coming from, as if the narcissist's delusional criticisms or accusations are valid somehow. They will consider the narcissist's point of view. They will attach importance to the narcissist's words and perceptions. They will, in short, attempt to deal with the narcissist the way they would deal with any other rational adult. The problem is, the narcissist is not a rational adult. The things they are saying in these situations legitimately don't deserve any consideration at all. What is not just complete and utter bullshit being senselessly spewed out by a person who has more feelings than sense is the truly misbegotten, misconstrued, misunderstood perceptions and conclusions of a person with a severe, untreated mental health problem. There's no reason to give these things any weight, consideration, or importance whatsoever, unless, of course, they're threats. Many narcissists will even say things to that effect afterward. They may completely dismiss the things that they've said or done as venting or as just things that happened because they were upset. And this is, of course, more gaslighting. Existing in such a conflicted, conflated, delusional world is extremely difficult for people. It's extremely damaging, and again, it's likely impossible to convey the seriousness, the consuming nature of this to people who haven't experienced it. Gaslighting, when dealing with narcissists, hits differently. It is much, much more than just lying or denying or making things up. It is the actual state of the relationship and of someone's reality when they interact with a narcissist. Up is down, good is bad, black is white, left is right. Nothing makes any sense. Nothing is logical, nothing is rational. You are swimming in a toxic soup all the time, and it's all you can do to keep your head above water just so that you don't drown in it. What's even worse, and if anyone hasn't ever dealt with this, they're probably thinking, how could it get worse than this? But it does. Is that the entire time this is happening, many narcissists will claim that you are gaslighting them. Part of this is because gaslighting is a very in vogue term right now, and narcissists often glom on to fads and things like that. But part of it is that due to their extremely affected perception, they may in fact believe that this is true. After all, what is gaslighting? It's intentionally and maliciously telling someone that their version of reality is false or incorrect so that you can manipulate or otherwise gain the upper hand in the situation somehow. And isn't that exactly what they believe they are experiencing according to their perception? Isn't that exactly what so many of them believe is happening to them? Isn't that the entire reason you can't just correct them over small things and everybody just move on with their lives? You bet it is. And complicating the issue even more is that so many of the quote gaslighting phrases out there include things that people say to narcissists because they're actually true. Like, you're overreacting. That never happened. That's all in your head. I was just kidding. That isn't what I meant. I never said that. The problem is that this information is just put out with no context or anything else, and the result is that people now believe that anytime these phrases are used, it's automatically gaslighting. That's false. For it to be gaslighting, these things have to be, at the very least, false. They have to be not true. If they're not, it's not gaslighting. For example, it isn't gaslighting to tell someone that you never said something if you really did not. It isn't gaslighting to tell someone you were just kidding if you really were. Narcissists seeing these things are able to use them to further gaslight victims into believing that they are the bad guy, they are the abuser, they are the crazy one. It is especially damaging when accusations of gaslighting are used to gaslight victims in this way. Now try wrapping your brain around that. It happens a lot with covert narcissists, but the claim of being constantly offended or constantly having hurt feelings can occur with any kind of narcissist or toxic personality. When someone constantly claims to be hurt, offended, insulted, or otherwise harmed, even by things that are innocent or even kind, that have been twisted out of proportion into something bad, it is absolutely within the realm of possibility that they might be told, you're being too sensitive or you're overreacting, because they are. They are being too sensitive. They are overreacting. When the toxic personality can then turn around and say that they've now been doubly harmed because the victim used a certain phrase, and this automatically proves that the toxic personality is being horribly abused, this effectively destroys the victim's ability to defend themselves, and perhaps even more damaging, it shuts down their ability to reality test. Because if they look it up, they will see that these are considered abusive things to say. Victims are left with nothing they can say or do to assert reality at all, because any assertion of reality can be called gaslighting, and anything outside of asserting reality can be taken as agreeing with the narcissist that the victim is the problem, which is an even worse option. Narcissists can be gullible, and they are often afflicted by a sort of like a tunnel vision. So seeing these phrases repeatedly listed as, quote, abusive with little to no context whatsoever only reinforces to them that anyone saying these things is mistreating them. And now they have proof. So God help you. People in relationships with narcissists are offered what is in effect a Hobson's choice. This is a scenario in which multiple choices appear to be being offered, but there really is only a single thing being given. Such as the situation we just described, where if you agree with me, you're bad, but if you don't agree with me, you're also bad. And in a broader context, narcissists appear to offer multiple things that they can be or do, but it's an illusion. As Father Merrin said in The Exorcist, there is only one. The bad side comes with the good side. The crazy side comes with the reasonable side. The light comes with the dark. The abusive side comes with the loving side. Dr. Jekyll is Mr. Hyde. There's no separation of this possible, regardless how much this person may try to tell you that there is. Whether that's through blaming you, or blaming somebody else, or drugs and alcohol, or claiming that it's just not who they really are, or anything else. However they try to distance themselves from this, it doesn't matter. Whenever you deal with pathologically narcissistic personalities, they're selling you the same thing over and over again. No matter how it appears and no matter what they say, you are being sold an unstable person with no real ability to create or sustain healthy reactions to things, no real identity to speak of, who has enormous difficulty perceiving things, people, situations, just reality in general, correctly. And it is an act of salesmanship, often more specifically what is known as a bait and switch. This is where people are baited into buying something that is not what they actually end up getting. It's usually something that's not as good of quality as the thing that they were lured in with, or something that is of commensurate quality but is actually more expensive than what they were originally told. For example, when something expensive seems to be available for a very low price, but whenever you get it, it's a low quality copy of the thing that it claims to be. That's a bait and switch. This is what narcissistic gaslighting attempts to obfuscate from both the narcissist and from everybody around them. Like in The Wizard of Oz, where the awe-inspiring, terrifying wizard was revealed to be just some little old guy pushing levers and using sound effects. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. You're not supposed to know you ended up with something that isn't what you thought it was until after it's too late to stop the transaction, and now you're stuck with it. The good thing is, it's never too late. You can at any time decide that you have had enough and you don't want to interact with this person anymore. Even if somehow you are required to do so, such as, for example, there's a court order in place, you can limit this as much as possible and you do not have to invest your emotional energy into it at all. That is how you protect yourself. The way to defeat gaslighting is not to force the gaslighter to admit they're lying or to convince them that your perception is more valid than theirs or anything like that. The way to defeat gaslighting is to know that it's happening. The bulk of the power that things like gaslighting have over other people comes from the fact that people are not educated about what's going on and therefore they just don't know. Once they do know, the bulk of the power of something like gaslighting disappears. Once people learn to take a step back and evaluate the situation and really look at it, they can usually see what's going on pretty clearly. This is the key. Narcissists and other toxic personalities attempt to control others by using their own emotional reactions against them. They provoke and attack and dismiss and ignore and do all the things they do in order to get people to react to them. Whether they know why they're doing it or how it works or not, and many of them don't, it doesn't matter because they know that doing this creates a situation where they can somehow take the upper hand, or at the very least, they're not the only ones who are upset, which probably feels like things are then a little more equal since they're now not the only bad ones. Once others are upset or once others can be attacked somehow, the others are now more worried about defending themselves. The subject has been shifted away from the narcissist and or whatever it is that they didn't want to address or to face. That's what gaslighting is at its core. It's a misdirection. It's an obfuscation. Gaslighting from narcissists is ever present, which means that interactions are literally nothing but relentless misdirection, relentless obfuscation. And it's much more than just words. Everything this person does is gaslighting because all of their thoughts, feelings, beliefs, responses, actions, and reactions are based on their lived experience of a reality that does not match actuality. Everything that doesn't go along with that is dismissed, attacked, denied, or deflected. For other people, it's like being in a movie that they didn't know they were in and cannot exit. They can't get out of it. There are scripts, roles, a plot, even a history here that people were and may still largely be completely unaware of, but have to try to navigate and live within every day, all without ever being told what these things even are. This is so damaging to people, not just because it's gaslighting with all the harm and the confusion that this entails just all by itself, but also because it's impossible. People legitimately cannot navigate a landscape that they don't understand, especially when the reason that they don't understand it is because it does not align with any version of reality or with their own lived experience in any way that they can see. For narcissists, reality itself is threatening. It's an aggression. It is the enemy. In order to fight that enemy, they have to create a reality they can tolerate. In order to preserve this created tolerable reality, they have to disregard, dismiss, deflect, or dismantle actuality, which means they have to essentially neutralize the reality of those around them when it doesn't agree with theirs, and it very often doesn't because the narcissist's tolerable reality isn't reality at all. It's a childish fantasy in which they and everyone around them become something other than what they truly are. For most people, when they engage in a fantasy, it's harmless. When reality intrudes on that fantasy and exposes it as a fantasy, this is disappointing or it's sad, but it's usually not that big of a deal. For narcissists, it's life-threatening. When faced with the reality of who and what they really are, what everything really is, narcissists cannot tolerate that. They rage against it. They attempt to avoid it, deny it, or even destroy it in order to keep from having to face and accept it. Gaslighting in narcissistic relationships is one of the ways they attempt to prevent that from happening. You didn't see what you think you saw. You didn't hear what you think you heard. That can't be allowed to be true, because if it is, then the tolerable reality is false. And if the tolerable reality is false, the only option left is an intolerable, aggressive, threatening, humiliating, shameful existence where not only are they not special and amazing and superior and exempt and whatever else, they're actually not that good of a person at all. Many narcissists have done some really terrible things, and if they lose their fantasy, if they lose that tolerable reality, they lose their ability to avoid, deny, or justify that behavior. This cannot be allowed to happen. Unlike non-narcissistic people who would be able to adjust to this, narcissists cannot. The result? Assimilation by force into the narcissist's tolerable reality where, more often than not, you are a villain somehow. When the narcissist remains a victim, for example, they remain blameless, they remain justified, and they cannot be held accountable for anything. Facing reality would force them to accept that that's false, that they are responsible for things, that they are to blame for things, that their behavior is not justified, and that they are accountable for their actions. You can see why this is not just unappealing, but actually extremely threatening to many, many pathologically narcissistic personalities. It doesn't matter if you agree with their reality or not either, because if you're dealing with them, if you're around them, you will be forcefully assimilated into it, whether you want to be assimilated or not. They will behave as if their reality is actuality, no matter how much conflicts with others that this creates, and generally it creates a lot. Just remember that their conflict isn't really with you or with any other person. Not really. It's with reality. Narcissists are at war with reality. You have taken reality's side over theirs. Now you are the enemy too. Even if you only injected reality into the situation by accident, which you will do repeatedly because you don't live in their reality. It doesn't even matter if it's an accident or not. You did it, and now it's been done. It isn't enough either just to hold space for their distorted perception or just to try to understand that or to say that you get why they believe this, etc., etc. You must agree that their perception is not just the true perception, but the only perception. It must become your lived experience. Anything less is a betrayal of the worst kind on the deepest level imaginable. You see, the narcissist fantasy doesn't work without the cooperation of literally everybody around them. And when other people won't willingly offer their cooperation, they will be tricked, threatened, manipulated, or otherwise forced into providing that. This is where gaslighting comes in, both intentional and unintentional. As you can see, gaslighting from narcissists is much, much more than using words to deny things or confuse other people or make things up. It is the entire environment around these personalities. It's the entire foundation of the relationship, and it does not stop until you are away from them. And while you can defeat much of the power of gaslighting by knowing that it's happening and being cognizant of your reality, your reactions, and just your stuff in general, this doesn't prevent it from affecting you in some ways. It's like being in a room with poison gas. Knowing there's poison gas in the room is imperative. It's very important to understand what's going on and how it's affecting you. However, knowing it's there does not protect you if you continue to be exposed to it. It can still hurt you even knowing that it's there. You have to get out of the room and away from the gas. It's the same with this. There is no successful or even safe way to deal with someone who lives in a completely different reality than you do. If you think about your interactions with the narcissist that you've known, their interactions with other people, the way that they perceive things, their reactions, their mindsets, you will see that this is true. They legitimately don't have the same lived experience that you are having in the same situations. It's just not a thing. Therefore, there is no way to create a shared reality or to even communicate with this person successfully. It's like trying to describe the color blue to a person who's been blind their entire life. It can't be done. The only thing that can be done is to realize what this is and move on in whatever way is feasible for you. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. Transrelational Healing is out and available on Amazon and littleshaman.org, so you can get your copy of that today. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you are interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, and seminars throughout the year. So if you are interested in seeing what we are running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. And if you're interested in joining our support group with access to exclusive content and weekly support meetings plus more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by Transrelational Healing and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to The Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about the act that narcissists put on. This act can look like different things for different people or at different times, but honestly, these differences are really just variations on a theme. The reality is that virtually all narcissists are putting on the same act in the sense that they're all pretending to be like everybody else in some form or another, and that's what we're going to talk about today. For all that we hear about narcissists being such superb actors and such master manipulators, in practical terms, this doesn't seem to be the case for many of them. Certainly, there are better manipulators than people who are not manipulators at all, but that's not really saying a lot, and most of that is actually down to simple practice. These people have a long history of doing this kind of thing, and they know what works. However, they're not necessarily conscious of how something works or why it works, which is why when something doesn't work, you very often see them continue to keep trying to do it anyway. It's more of a habit or a conditioned behavior in this way than it is a planned out plot or a thought out scheme. If there was that much thought being put into it, they would realize when it's not working and try something else, but a large majority of them do not. The act they put on is no different. They do it because this is what they do. An alligator doesn't plan to look and behave like a floating log. This is just what they do. It's what works for their particular skill sets and their abilities, their sort of level of evolution, if you will. In a very real way, the way that narcissists function is exactly the same. The way that everybody functions is the same in that regard, really, just as some people have a more limited range of skill sets and abilities. If you can reason and communicate and do for yourself to accomplish what you need to accomplish in order to get through life, then you will. If you can't do those things, you will do something else in order to accomplish what you need to accomplish. It's that simple. This is what the Narcissistic Personalities Act really is, them doing something else. These personalities are pretty limited in terms of functionality, processing it in a lot of other areas. Many of the things that other people do to live in this world, narcissists can't actually do. They can't bond, they can't trust, they can't communicate, they can't fulfill their own needs or even identify them. So they do something else. They pretend that they can do those things. It sounds kind of pathetic when you just say it right out loud like that, but it actually serves them well a lot of the time. Most people don't look much deeper into things, and if there's no scrutiny, the narcissist act actually holds up pretty well. If people do start looking more closely, though, that's when it starts to fall apart. It's kind of like wearing a disguise. From a distance, or if you just glance over really quickly, a person wearing a disguise will probably fool you. Up close, however, a person wearing a disguise just looks like a person wearing a disguise. You might not be able to tell what they really look like, but you can tell they don't look like that. You can tell there's something wrong with this picture. Or maybe like if somebody was pretending to be a doctor, and not somebody who has all of the education but no license to practice medicine. We're talking about someone who is literally pretending to be a doctor based solely on how they've seen doctors act and what they think doctors should be like. They might fool some people in some situations, but as soon as anybody with even a basic rudimentary knowledge of anything about medicine started asking questions, it would become very obvious that this person is not a doctor. Part of the reason narcissists are able to get away with such blatant lies, like pretending to be a doctor, or pretending to not be married, or going to school for years when they're really not, or being wealthy when they aren't, and all of the other lies that this kind of personality is notorious for telling, is that most people don't seriously consider that somebody is going to lie about something so fundamental and so obvious. Their act, even if it's not something as dramatic as pretending to be a doctor, is no different. It's a lie about things so fundamental and so easy to see through that people actually don't see through it because they don't look. It's too big and too fundamental to see. Kind of like not knowing that the mountain you're standing on is a sleeping dinosaur until it starts to get up. The thing is, too, as unbelievable as it seems, even when people know this, they still don't understand how deep this actually goes. Even when people understand that the narcissist is putting on an act, they often don't realize how much of an act it really is. A true narcissist is more than just a person who's pretending to care in a relationship in order to get something, or a person who's pretending to be a loving parent when other people are around. A true narcissist is a person who does not really understand how to function, manage, or get along in life at all. Even basic conversations are high-stakes, high-pressure situations for the true narcissist. Inside, they are perpetually lost and confused, unsure of how to act or what to say, and never knowing if what they're doing or saying is the right thing or not. If you pay attention to them, you can actually see that, and once you know what you're looking for, you will not be able to understand how you ever could have missed it. It is that obvious. But only when you know, only when you really look. Many people believe the narcissists act that they're so together or confident or valuable or amazing or whatever. They believe the narcissist is altruistic or a hero or a victim. They believe the narcissist is so powerful or so helpless. Of course they believe it. The narcissist needs them to believe it so that they themselves can believe it. This means they work very hard at performing it. It's their version of an identity, and it's very likely they believe that everybody else is doing the same thing. The problem for them is that their behavior contradicts their words completely. These are not the actions of people who believe that they are worth anything, let alone worth so much more than everybody else. This is an act. It's an overcompensation for believing they have no value or worth at all, and whether the persona is a bully, or a superstar, or a victim, or a hero, it's all the same. This is the identity that the narcissist learned would be valued by others in whatever context that word has for them, and would thus get them what they need, so that's what they pretend to be. For many, it probably isn't even pretending in the classic sense, because that word implies a purposeful intent to be phony. Narcissists may believe the persona they portray is who they really are, despite the fact that they're aware they are trying to hide things. Rather than a calculated and purposeful attempt to be something that they know they're not, it's more likely that for many narcissists, this is who they want to be for whatever reason, think they need to be, or have tried to convince themselves that they really are, because to be themselves is not acceptable. So they came up with some sort of identification narrative during their early socialization experiences, and this is the role they live out to the best of their abilities, which usually isn't very well, to be honest. Much of their behavior contradicts it, and people do notice that eventually. Because their behavior often directly contradicts the identity narrative put forth by the narcissist, people very understandably feel that they've been lied to and tricked by the narcissist. They are left angry and hurt that somebody that they trusted is not who they said they were. The reality is, these people are actually nobody. They're just walking around trying to hide what they think they really are so they can survive without being rejected and abandoned by the rest of the human herd. Avoiding rejection and abandonment at all costs is not just evidence of an unaddressed childhood wound, for example. It's a survival instinct going back to the days when our ancestors were cavemen. There is safety in numbers, as the saying goes. Being rejected and abandoned by the group equals death. People will automatically do anything they can to avoid this as a matter of survival, and if you have no skills with which to prevent it, then your brain will do whatever it can, including pretending to have those skills or imitating them. This can be hard for people to understand, but only because people are looking at it through their own eyes. It would be difficult for you to pretend to be something you're not, but that's because you don't usually go around doing that. You don't need to. This is what these particular personalities do. And in some ways, it's no more difficult for them than it is for you to just walk around being who you are. It requires no more planning or knowledge or anything else. They do this as a matter of course because it's what they do. In the absence of a true identity and the skills necessary to avoid rejection from the group, this is the workaround that their brain came up with in order to function, and it works the same way everyone else's brain does in that respect, automatically. In other ways, though, it's a lot harder for them. Not because they have to consciously try to plan out a fake identity. As we discussed earlier, they may believe this is their real identity, even though they know they're hiding things. It's harder because they're constantly afraid of exposure. Though they may believe their persona is who they really are, most narcissists know they are hiding something. They believe they have a bad side or another side to themselves that people would reject if they saw it. The way this is often expressed in the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of split personality dynamic is evidence of that. Non-psychopathic narcissists struggle greatly with shame, so they generally find any negative qualities or emotions within themselves so disturbing and uncomfortable that they disown them, distancing themselves from these things entirely. When the things come out, as they will because they're part of the narcissist, the same way that everyone's perceived flaws, emotions, and negative qualities are parts of them, the narcissistic personality insists that these things are not representative of who they are, disowning them even more. Of course, this is ridiculous. These things are part of what makes up the narcissist the same way they're a part of everybody. But because of their toxic shame, narcissistic personalities cannot tolerate this being true. They have to deny it. They have to distance themselves from it. They have to protect their belief that they are a good, worthy, and valuable person, which means no flaws, no mistakes, no negative anything. This super rigid standard of what makes somebody a quote-unquote good person is ridiculously unreasonable and unrealistic, creating a very large split between who they are and who they want to be or think they need to be if they want to have value or worth so they won't be rejected. It's quite a contradiction. They may interpret this contradiction along the lines of something like, well, but that's not me. I'm not the kind of person who would do something like that, even though they very clearly are the kind of person who would do something like that because they did it. These disowned parts, having been pushed away and disavowed, are then subsequently allowed to exist unchecked and unacknowledged, often resulting in them becoming disproportionate and out of control. This makes them even more disturbing and even more uncomfortable for the narcissist, which means they try even harder to suppress, hide, deny, and refuse to acknowledge them. And so it goes, becoming more and more and more of a problem and ramping up the narcissist's anxiety more and more and more around the fear that someone is going to somehow find out about these awful secret flaws and reject them because of it. Their experiences only serve to reinforce this fear because when people do see their flaws or mistake, all of these disowned parts suddenly leap into view, and it's so different from their previous persona that it's like a different person has suddenly shown up. This can be shocking for people, and their reaction is perceived as rejection by the narcissist. And really, it is a rejection. In their desperation to hide and deny these quote-unquote bad parts of themselves, the narcissist has neither addressed nor even acknowledged them at all. These parts have been allowed to exist, ignored, and basically completely unchecked in any way. When they inevitably make their appearance, they can be shocking, even monstrous, due to how completely and constantly repressed they are, and people are often totally unprepared for it. The narcissist fears rejection from other people because in a very real way, they've rejected themselves. It's like narcissists have a bear in their house, and instead of trying to get rid of it, they just pretend it's not there. Eventually, people are going to run into it. It's even worse than that, too, because since the narcissist is in complete denial that the bear is there at all, they don't even warn you. They don't even tell you to watch out for it. You just happen upon it yourself. Of course, you run away because there's a freaking bear in there, and this just reinforces to the narcissist that they need to continue to reject and repress and deny this side of themselves even more, instead of realizing that doing that is what's causing the problem. You can see then that the act that they're putting on, though in some ways natural and completely automatic for them due to the workaround strategies their brain has had to come up with, would be very important for them to keep up, and how much energy goes into trying to deny and reject anything negative about themselves and to perform this act for people. In some ways, it's part of the narcissistic supply. Narcissistic supply is often misunderstood. Yes, it refers to attention, which supplies a narcissistic personality with validation that they exist, that they matter, that they have power, etc. But it also does something else, something extremely important. The way it works is this. Narcissistic personality has no stable identity, self-image, and no ability to manufacture self-worth. This is the core inability of this personality. It's their most fundamental problem. Narcissistic personality has an identity narrative they'd like to believe in, but can't because of the problem with no identity, no ability to create self-worth. This identity narrative can be hero, victim, martyr, a successful person, a rich person, whatever, right? The narcissistic personality needs other people to perform this identity for, because then those people will reflect or mirror this identity back to the narcissist as if it were real. The narcissist can believe in it too when that happens. They need others to quote unquote supply their experiences of self-worth and identity. It is the only way they can have that experience. The narcissistic personality does achieve this for a short period of time, but all those disowned parts start to shine through. Their disorder shines through. Then the narcissistic personality needs new people to perform for, because the old people are not reflecting the same image back to the narcissist anymore, which attacks the narcissist's unstable identity at its core and leads to destabilizing, debilitating, toxic shame. And so on and so on and so on, that the cycle repeats. They have a lot of practice performing this identity for a lot of different people. Consequently, many people believe the narcissist act. It's easy to be fooled by it because it's so consistent. But one of the big reasons that it is so consistent is because the lack of self-worth and identity that it's a reaction to are so consistent. That never goes away, and it always needs to be counteracted. It's the narcissist endlessly saying to everyone around them, but most of all to themselves, any negative stuff is not me. That's not really who I really am. I have no negative qualities or behavior. I'm perfect and therefore I have value, so don't think that that's not true. Don't think I'm worthless or unimportant. Don't reject me. People sometimes wonder how it's possible, for example, that narcissists are so self-absorbed and so self-focused and so entitled but have no self-worth. Doesn't entitlement and egocentricity prove they care about themselves and think they're valuable? The answer is no, it does not. Narcissists are egocentric and self-important, but these things do not equate to self-worth. Those things are not synonyms. In fact, part of the reason they are egocentric and self-important in the first place is because they're afraid they're not important to anybody else. That's why they constantly insist that people need to pay attention to them and fulfill their needs and do what they want. It's also why they rage and break down and leave when these things don't happen. To a narcissist, that's proof that they don't matter, and they have no way to counteract that at all. The only way they have to experience feelings of worth or value is through the constant reactions and reinforcement of other people. And because they engage in rigid black and white thinking, if they're not the most important thing, this means they don't matter at all. This is one of the big reasons why they don't believe anybody cares about them, for example. They can never be made to feel important enough that they could believe that's actually true. It's a sad irony that this can never happen, largely in part because they simply don't believe in anything positive that they're given or shown. But even if they did, it wouldn't matter. The requirement is they must be treated as more important than everything and everybody at all times, and it's just not even possible to do that. Even if it was possible and you did do it, it still wouldn't matter because they still wouldn't believe that you feel that way. Yeah, you did it, but do you really feel that way? They want something that it's just not possible to give them, and because they're so challenged and so limited in so many areas, they just don't seem to recognize that. They go around believing that it's everyone else's job to convince them of how they should feel about themselves, and when nobody can convince them that they matter or that they have value, because nobody can do that because it's impossible to make somebody believe something they just flat out don't think is true, they're blamed and punished by the narcissist for failing. Narcissists enjoy being flattered and supported and put on a pedestal, but they don't really believe in good things said about them or done for them. They really only believe in things that are negative or mean. They like to hear positive stuff, but they don't believe it. The closest they could get is that they might believe you believe any positive things that you're saying about them. They just think that you're wrong. Most of the time, they don't even believe that you believe it. This is why people are so often accused of lying or being manipulative when they're trying to be kind or complimentary toward narcissists in their lives. This can get even worse too, because the narcissists often insist that the reason they don't believe you is your fault somehow. It's because of you, or something you said or didn't say, or something you did or didn't do. They want you to somehow make them believe you or to convince them, which of course you cannot do. It's an absolutely unwinnable situation that there is 0 point in participating in, because they're not capable of trusting you or their own discernment enough to believe anyone means anything said about them unless it's bad. Part of the reason for this is because, don't forget, they know something you don't. Behind the act that they're putting on is an unlovable pile of human garbage, toxic waste that people would run screaming from if they saw it. Like, so dramatic, right? So they'll never believe you care about them because this is what they think about themselves, yet they can't tolerate the idea that you don't care about them because this shames them. If people reject you and don't care about you, you're bad, you're worthless. That's how they think. This is why they blame you for it. They're unable to deal with the shame of this, but they're also unable to see it any other way, so they have to blame it on somebody. This is often framed then as an attack on the other person, but what the narcissist is really saying over and over again is, there's no possible way anybody could think anything good about me or care about me at all, so you're lying or you're just stupid. Their self-loathing is very deep and colors a large amount of their reactions, thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors, but it's also often unconscious. Remember, these people don't do negative anything, and that especially includes negative or painful emotions like self-loathing. Even if the self-loathing never slips through into their consciousness, we can see it in their behavior, because this kind of thing always comes through somehow. It's too big to hide. Narcissists often shame, mock, attack, or demean people for caring about them, for example. And though this is almost monstrously horrible to do to somebody, consider what it actually means. Think about it. When someone says that they like you and thinks that you're smart or you're funny or whatever, do you just automatically assume they're lying because you're actually not smart or funny? Do you just automatically assume people are lying and don't really like you because it's just not possible that anybody would like you? Of course not. But these people do. And it isn't just when they've screwed people over. This is actually one of the first things that starts to show up in relationships with narcissists. Their inability to believe anyone actually likes or cares about them, which often comes out as accusations, paranoia, and distrust. Essentially, the narcissist is saying that they believe they are so wretched and so loathsome that if you insist that you care about them, something must be seriously wrong with you. Their self-loathing is auto-corrected into projection here and is translated into that you deserve to be used, duped, cheated, or mistreated, because if you actually care about such a worthless pile of human garbage, you're obviously just too stupid to be valuable. And you're probably just lying anyway, because nobody could really care about anyone else, and especially no one can care about them. This whole thing is about the narcissist and their delusionally negative feelings for themselves, just like everything else that has to do with these personalities always is. That's why we encourage, why we insist, really, that you not take this horrible BS personally. Because it's not personal. It's not about you at all. In point of fact, it has absolutely nothing to do with you in any way. You're a convenient target. They try to make it about you because they can't deal with the true reality of their feelings, but they will absolutely tell on themselves every single time if you can look past the crude, childish misdirection at what they are really saying. That's the moral of the story here when it comes to the narcissist act and every other thing about them. These people are an illusion. If you want to know the reality of the situation, look past the misdirection and see what you see. When you're dealing with a narcissist, chances are it will be the exact opposite of where they are trying to point you. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. We have opened up subscriptions to the YouTube channel, so if you're interested in finding out what perks will come with that, you can check that out. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year, so if you'd like to see what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. And if you're interested in joining our support group with twice weekly support meetings, access to exclusive content, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, thank you for joining us here on the littleshaman.com. You're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by Transrelational Healing, shamanspiritcenter.com, and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. If you are listening to this podcast episode on something other than YouTube, I just wanted to throw it out there that there are more than 800 videos on YouTube, and you can access the YouTube channel by going to thelittleshaman.com. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone that the Spirit Clinic is this weekend, September 20th, 21st, and 22nd. 3 days of virtual workshops, information, release ceremonies, and more, all hosted by yours truly. Some of the topics presented include breaking negative self-talk patterns, family of origin healing, nutrition, stress management, relaxation, finding a spiritual community, conquering the ego, and more. You can attend 1 day, 2 days, or all three. If you would like to join us, we would love to see you. The event will be held over Zoom, and you can visit littleshaman.org and click on Spirit Clinic for more information, and I've also posted a link to the event in the comments below. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that is unfortunately very common in virtually all relationships of any kind with virtually all narcissists of any kind, and that is projection. You are probably familiar with projection if you've been educating yourself about narcissistic personalities and the related relationship dynamics. Projection is when someone takes things that belong to them and assigns ownership or responsibility for them to other people, such as their own feelings or their own behaviors. A very simple example of this would be that someone is mad at their friend, so they perceive that their friend is mad at them. Or maybe they don't sincerely perceive this, but they claim that it's true, that they're not the one who's angry, so that they don't have to take responsibility for that emotion. Projection is ever present in relationships with narcissists. Narcissists cannot hold or process any negative emotional experiences, and they cannot tolerate any negative behaviors in themselves or beliefs about themselves, and they feel these things all the time. Negative internal experiences are near constant for pathologically narcissistic personalities. The majority of their energy is actually spent trying to ignore, mitigate, deny, or otherwise avoid these things. Because of this, they engage in routine, perhaps even constant, automatic projection of all their negative emotions, behaviors, traits, beliefs, and experiences. If they cannot project the things themselves onto other people, they will project blame and or responsibility for them. So to use our example, if they can't say that you are the one who's angry, they will say that you caused their anger. Now, projecting negative emotions, behaviors, and traits gets a lot of attention. So much so that many people might think that only negative emotions, traits, or behaviors are projected. This is not the case. As much as the narcissistic personality is projecting onto the other person or the people in this situation, those people are generally projecting just as much onto the narcissist. The difference is people are usually projecting positive or at the very least non-harmful things onto the narcissist, such as empathy, understanding, compassion, and more. Some of this projection is the result of the basic projection required for communication and connection. As we discussed in the episode of the show called Narcissists and the Eliza Effect, communication requires basic empathy. Empathy requires basic projection. We have to connect on at least a basic human level. Otherwise, it would be like talking to a space alien where you would have to ask them what every single word they said means. And in most situations with most people, this level of projection is a completely normal, safe practice that we engage in every single day, all the time, without even thinking about it because we don't need to think about it. It works the way it's supposed to, which means it happens without anybody being aware of it. It's just automatic. There are some times, though, that it doesn't work. There are some times that it's unsafe. These are the times when even these basic automatic projections are false, such as what commonly happens when we're dealing with pathologically narcissistic personalities. We initially project things like empathy and understanding onto them as a matter of course. It happens automatically. The problem comes when we can see clear evidence that our projections are missing the mark, as we eventually will, and it often doesn't even take that long. But then we continue to project things onto the narcissist that we have no real evidence for at all. We assume these things are there because we have them in us and because we need them to be there in the other person. The problem is they actually are not there. And beyond our natural basic projected assumption, there's often no real evidence that they ever were. For example, in romantic entanglements, people often say that narcissists seem like decent, quote unquote, normal people in the beginning of the relationship. Yeah, but did they? Did they really? What we often find is that the answer to this question is actually no. And when people look back, they see that the reality has actually been there the entire time. It wasn't even really hidden that well. People were just looking for or at other things. Even when the reality is seen, it's often not seen for what it really is or for what it truly means. It may be explained or even dismissed using more normal types of frameworks, even though the behavior itself may actually not be what most people would consider normal or fall within any metric that is considered acceptable. People might say things like, oh, well, men don't listen, or women tend to be more emotional, or this person is just dramatic, or, well, but some people have trust issues. These things may or may not be true in general, but it doesn't even matter because the reality is that so often a narcissist's behavior falls so far outside of what most people would consider normal expressions of this framework that it really doesn't fit at all. Instead of normalizing behavior that is harmful and abnormal, instead of trying to find a framework to fit it into that makes it normal and therefore acceptable, we need to learn to accept it for what it is. As an aside, people sometimes have resistance to the word normal, and that's fine as far as that goes, right? However, there is a line where almost everyone can agree that something is too far beyond what is considered natural or healthy or acceptable. If someone ate their food by inhaling it through their ears, that would not be normal. In this same way, if, for example, someone has an emotional breakdown, a crisis, because you didn't seem happy enough when you said hello to them, this is also not normal. It's important to remember this is not a judgment of the other person's value or their worth. It's just an observation of the appropriateness of response to a given situation. We're not talking about feelings of disappointment or sadness if someone clearly does not seem excited to see you, for example. We are talking about someone spinning into emotional crisis over what most would consider to be a very minor, low-stakes interaction. People who routinely deal with pathologically narcissistic personalities know this type of situation all too well, unfortunately. This type of extreme reaction is an indication of a bigger, more serious problem, and to minimize or normalize it is dangerous. While it can be uncomfortable to feel like we're labeling or judging other people, we can't get so bogged down in trying to be fair and trying to be conscientious that we become irrational ourselves or lose the ability to address the reality of the situation. When we look at the narcissistic personality's behavior, at the things that they have said and done, at the way they act and react to various things, we realize that regardless of how well they may or may not be able to, quote, talk the talk, there is no actual reason to believe that things like empathy or even a basic understanding that other people exist and matter actually happens for them. Nothing we consistently see from this personality points to this. In fact, in so many situations, it actually points to the opposite. And when we are able to stop projecting and stop normalizing their behavior into these regular frameworks, we can generally see this pretty clearly. It's not even really hidden. Everything is about them. Every situation only matters insofar as to how it affects them, period. When we remove the filters of denial and projection, we can see this so clearly, people often wonder how they ever could have missed it. It's that blatant and that obvious so many times. Our innate function of projection blinds us to this long enough for an emotional investment to be created, an emotional attachment. Then denial and cognitive dissonance take over. Once this happens, the projection actually often becomes worse, not better. People see what they need to see, because to not see it is to have to face unpleasant things about the narcissist, the situation, the relationship, and themselves. This is why, for example, people are often so invested in the idea that the narcissist hates them and obsesses over destroying them. This idea still creates the illusion that they mattered to the narcissist in some way. Whether you think that's true or not doesn't matter. The narcissist does not even really see you. You don't matter to them at all. You are a mirror reflecting themselves back to them. And when you look into a mirror, you don't see the mirror. You see yourself. No matter how this shakes out, no matter what they say, no matter what they do, they are obsessing over their own reflection, not you. The relationship is an illusion. The narcissist is an illusion. Your idealized self and who you felt like you were in the relationship is an illusion. It is only the belief in these things that makes them seem real. It's like a placebo, right? When people are given a placebo, they're not really given any real medicine at all. The belief in the illusion makes it real. Maybe more precisely for this situation, it's like a starving dog eating a Whopper wrapper. The dog is so hungry and so entranced by the smell of food, the promise of food, the illusion of food, that he gobbles up the wrapper without realizing that what he's eating is not food. It's an attractive package that smells like food, but offers no actual sustenance at all. That is the relationship with a narcissist, the promise of something that never comes. It's a reflection of a shadow of a ghost. This is why you have to stop projecting onto the narcissist. Projection is the opposite of empathy. With empathy, we see how the other person feels. With projection, we see how we feel. Projection distorts reality. When you are dealing with someone who is so selfish and so toxic, this can be very harmful. If you are not seeing someone for who and how they actually are, you could very well be miscalculating the level of danger that you are in. It is extremely unsafe to assume someone has empathy, compassion, limits, morals that they don't actually have. Wanting to see the best in people, for example, is a wonderful thing, but there's a point where it's just flat out dangerous. Your safety is more important than the need to see yourself or others a certain way. Much more important. I see the best in people cannot be a badge of honor or identity that's more important to you than your own safety. And wanting to believe in a comforting illusion cannot take precedence over actual safety and well-being. If it does, you are going to lose. And you will be lucky if all you lose is the relationship. Ultimately, there's a lot more at risk than hurt feelings. This doesn't mean that you have to become cynical and never trust anybody again, but it does mean that we have to stay grounded in reality and trust appropriately. Don't give people responsibility for things that belong to you, such as protecting yourself. So many people try to go through life never having boundaries and just hoping that they're not going to need them. The discomfort of enforcing boundaries is something that they're afraid of or they don't want to deal with it, so they place the responsibility for their safety and well-beings into the hands and judgment of other people. That's a mistake. It is nobody's responsibility to protect you from the evils of the world or other people, and nobody will. We are not children. Nobody is coming on their white horse to save us, and no grown-up is going to step in at the last minute to make everything okay. We have to do it ourselves, and we start by recognizing the need to protect ourselves in the first place. Having compassion, for example, is wonderful, but there's a difference between volunteering in a situation that's controlled where safety is prioritized versus walking into the lion's mouth unarmed all by yourself and just trusting it not to eat you. We have to be willing to see things as they are and respond to them appropriately. It's important to understand where limits apply here. If the situation requires you to be harmed or mistreated in any way, that needs to be limit. People often cite compassion and pity as the biggest reason they have trouble exiting relationships with narcissists. And that's fine as far as it goes. But if you have pity for the bears at the zoo, for example, you probably don't try to bring them home into your house or venture into their enclosures. There's a limit to how far this pity and compassion can go. We need to recognize that these limits apply to human beings as well, perhaps more especially to human beings as well, and not project qualities onto people that they do not have. Not all humans have empathy. Not all humans have compassion. Not all humans will do the right thing. Not all humans have morals or a better nature that you can appeal to. Not all humans care about other people. This is a fact. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. These people exist, and there are a lot of them. If we refuse to understand that or refuse to believe it, we do so to our own detriment. Instead of assuming or even insisting that these qualities must be in there somewhere, we need to accept when we are consistently being shown that a person either does not have these qualities or is not willing to act on them. And we need to do this every time we are shown this reality because it's too dangerous to be wrong. This is not to say, oh no, we should never trust anybody, never take a risk. It means take appropriate risk, calculated risks. Wanting people to be or have something doesn't make it so. The best we can do is be as realistic as possible when dealing with other people, create and enforce boundaries with everyone, and learn to trust appropriately. It's hurtful and disappointing to realize that we're not going to get what we want from this person or this relationship or this situation, but it's much less hurtful and disappointing than if we keep trying to get it where there's no real chance of it ever happening at all, but we just refuse to accept that. How do we know when this is the case? By looking, by listening. Stop guessing, stop assuming, stop interpreting, stop denying, stop projecting. Really see and really hear what's going on. Really look and really listen. In order to see, one has only to look. In order to hear, one has only to listen. If we can stop buying into the ridiculous cartoon gimmick of these personalities, if we can push our own feelings and projections to the side and just look, really look, we will likely find that the truth has been right there in front of us the entire time. We just didn't see it. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, through Skype and Zoom worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year. Remember, we have one coming up this weekend. If you're interested in seeing what else we are running, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I have several books out for publication, and audio books are coming. So if you are interested in picking up a copy, you can visit littleshaman.org today, or you can go on amazon.com. If you are interested in joining our support group with access to exclusive content and weekly support meetings, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by Transrelational Healing, shamanspiritcenter.com, and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to The Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and thank you for joining us here on the littleshaman.com. You are listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by Transrelational Healing, shamanspiritcenter.com, and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that virtually everyone deals with when dealing with narcissists, and that is that narcissists twist things. This is unfortunately extremely common, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. In communication, certain things have to happen. At the very, very least, We have to speak the same language as the person we're trying to communicate with, and we have to have an agreed upon reality that we are both communicating about. If we don't have at least these things, there can be no understanding, which means that there cannot be any actual communication between us. Communication is predicated on understanding. For example, I am talking to you now in a language that we all understand, using words that we all know and can process about an agreed upon subject that I outlined in the beginning of this episode and that you agreed to engage with when you clicked on the episode to listen to it. We can communicate. I can talk and you can listen and you can understand. If you would like to respond, you can, and I can understand you. If we run into confusion, we can ask clarifying questions and engage in further communication until we understand each other. That's communicating, and it's largely made possible by the existence of those two things that we first mentioned. We are speaking the same language, and we are communicating about an agreed upon reality. We're doing that because we are attempting to arrive at understanding of some kind. The goal of healthy communication is understanding. You are listening to this to gain understanding, and I am offering it for the same reason, to facilitate and foster understanding. You want to understand, I want to be understood. I want to understand, and you want to be understood. We both have the same goal. Any misunderstandings that might occur can therefore be resolved or worked through because we're both working toward the same goal. However, when you are dealing with pathologically narcissistic personalities, you do not have the same goal. You are not speaking the same language, and you do not have an agreed upon reality. Because of this, misunderstandings run rampant in interactions with narcissists, and they usually cannot be resolved. The narcissist will not allow it. This is often confusing for people because why wouldn't someone want a misunderstanding to be resolved? Furthermore, why is this person seemingly incapable of understanding that there even has been one? Why are they attacking me, calling me a liar, refusing to speak to me, or whatever other thing they're doing instead of just accepting my explanation of what I really meant? Why is this going like this? Why can't I stop it from happening? What is the problem? The problem is that narcissists operate from a place of extreme defensiveness. It's so extreme that it makes them incapable of critically evaluating information. On top of that, they don't trust themselves to do this anyway. They seem to have decided that if they can't find an absolutely foolproof way to be able to tell whether something is true or a lie, or whether something is dangerous or not, they will simply assume that everything is harmful and everything is a lie, no matter who is saying it or what else is going on. This way, they're never vulnerable to attack. They cannot be tricked or manipulated or made a fool of. They cannot be hurt. They think this protects them. It does not. What it actually does is make exactly what they were afraid of into reality. I'm afraid that you will lie to me, hurt me, or trick me somehow, and I cannot tolerate the shame attached to that, so I have decided that you actually are trying to do that all the time. This way, I can't be caught off guard. I am no better off than I was before, and I actually feel worse than I would if I looked at things logically and in context, but at least it didn't catch me off guard. It couldn't because I didn't give it a chance to surprise me. I expected it all the time, and that way I was ready for it. It surprises the other person, though, and of course it does. Most people do not deal with this level of distrust and irrationality on a regular basis. Many have never encountered it at all before they met this person. Even people who have dealt with very abusive human beings in the past are often not prepared for the experience of dealing with the pathologically narcissistic personality. It's like a cartoon, a caricature. How can a real human being behave this way, say these things, think these things? How can a person over the age of 4 years old believe in such black and white characterizations of life and of other human beings? But narcissists do, and everything that happens is twisted to fit into this very narrow understanding. Ironically, this is one of the ways we can tell that so much of this is sincere. People often ask, how do they do that so fast? How do narcissists twist things so quickly? How can they think that fast? The answer is they don't. They are actually interpreting it that way. There's no need to reflect and calculate and come up with scenarios or ways to fit things together much of the time. They are reporting their experience in real time. In this situation, even calling it twisting is probably overstating what's actually happening. To say that they're twisting the narrative or the events in this particular context implies that this is something being done consciously. And in these specific situations, it's not. For narcissists, there are only two ways that a thing can be. And since they don't really believe in the goodness of other people, there's really only one. It's black or it's white. And for narcissists, it's almost always black. Again, they think assuming this protects them from being hurt and trying to convince them that this is not necessary is like trying to convince somebody that breathing is not necessary. It's a survival mechanism, and as far as they can see, it has worked very well for them. It has not, of course, but they only remember the times that this mindset appears to have been validated and therefore reinforced and protected them, even if they had to twist things in order for that to be true. They don't seem to realize that if you always expect something bad to happen, just based on the law of averages, you will eventually be right at some point. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Even a blind pig comes up with an acorn every once in a while. They also don't seem to realize that if you're looking for something, you will find it, even if you have to make it up to see it. This is true of people, not just narcissists. Studies done on this phenomenon have shown that people who were asked to find all the blue dots in an exercise began finding them even when there actually weren't any. They expected there to be blue dots, so when there no longer were any blue dots, they saw dots as blue that were not blue. Or think about when you get a new red car and you start seeing red cars everywhere for a while. There aren't any more or less red cars than there were before you bought yours. You're just actively looking for them now. If you were also afraid of red cars or you thought they were dangerous, you very likely might identify some cars as red that others would not consider red. Why? Because you're hyper-focused on that and you have to make sure that you didn't miss any, because if you do, you could be harmed. Expectation has a massive impact on perception. In many ways, we see what we expect to see. Our brains tend to look for and remember details and information that confirms our expectations. This is how cognitive biases are created, for example. When dealing with someone who is so disconnected from reality anyway, the impact of expectation on their perception is beyond massive. It may, in fact, be the single biggest factor of influence here. They expect you to be evil or stupid or cruel or whatever other negative thing, so they perceive that you actually are these things. They expect to be attacked, so they perceive that they actually are being attacked. This creates a negative feedback loop that just keeps reinforcing itself and becomes entrenched into the person's worldview. Each time their expectations are confirmed, whether through misinterpretation or through reality, it reinforces their belief system, leading to a cycle of more distrust and more hostility that can be extremely difficult to break. Fear also impacts perception enormously, and as you can probably guess, in much the same ways. Fear is a very powerful motivator, and it tends to color our perceptions more than other feelings because it's so strong and we react to it so intensely. If people are also afraid of something they are expecting, this can make their perceptions and their reactions much stronger and much more distorted. Not only might they see it anyway, whether it's there or not, but it can become what is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is where a person behaves in such a way that creates the situation they're afraid of, such as expecting and being so afraid that a partner will leave them that they constantly accuse the partner of cheating or otherwise betraying and abandoning them when they haven't. So the partner exits the relationship because they're tired of not being trusted, tired of not being believed, and tired of being accused of things they didn't do. Or expecting and being so afraid someone's going to be angry at you that you behave in such a way toward them that they then become angry when initially they were not. This is related to something called projective identification, which is the process by which people not only project their fears, insecurities, and negative feelings onto others, they actually create them. Other examples of this could be someone hating themselves and expecting and fearing that others will hate them too, so they end up behaving in ways that cause people to hate them. Or someone who expects and fears being mistreated, so they act in ways that are designed to induce other people to do things that they then interpret as mistreatment, such as provoking other people until they lash out. So, what does all of this mean? It means expectation plus fear is extremely powerful. It can create very distorted perception, can even cause things to happen. And this is in people who are not struggling with the same deficits as pathologically narcissistic people. For those who do have these deficits, the impact of expectation plus fear is magnified significantly. A narcissist's inability to process emotion and information accurately in the first place means they are even more susceptible to these distorted perceptions and seeing or even creating things that are not there. This can lead to a heightened sense of paranoia and a hypersensitivity to perceived slights, making interactions with them toxic, stressful, and absolutely fraught with misunderstandings, which are then impossible to resolve because this person does not trust or believe anything anybody says, and they can't tolerate being wrong on top of that. And this checks out. Narcissists expect the absolute worst to happen, and then they won't believe that it didn't. They are essentially attempting to force other people to act out the narcissist's fears, carry the narcissist's own negative feelings toward themselves, so the narcissist does not have to do that. Understanding this helps to demystify narcissists and put their behavior in a better perspective. This is especially helpful in situations where they are twisting the narrative or the events on purpose. Because, yes, they do this out of ignorance, simply because that's the limited way in which they function. They also do it strategically. When you are a prisoner of needing to control what other people see and how they think of you, narrative control is extremely important. How can you control these things if you don't control the narrative? Things will be twisted strategically to fit into whatever the narcissist narrative is. This usually has to do with whatever idealized image of themselves that they are perpetrating. Very often, this is of themselves as a victim of some kind, but it can be anything. This idealized image, this false self, is the star of the show, and narcissists make the movie around the star. After all, if the star of the movie is a tough gunslinger, you don't make the movie about that guy being a circus clown. The backdrop has to reinforce, support, and help create the image. Otherwise, the movie, the illusion, doesn't work. It's not believable. Most importantly, it's not believable to the narcissist. So when something happens where they can't sincerely believe themselves to be their idealized false self, they will twist things until the things fit into that. People sometimes ask, how can they tell the difference between when this is being done on purpose and when it's being done out of ignorance? But the reality is that it doesn't matter. If someone thinks that there's some significant difference here, that's just what they think. The reality is that there's not. It isn't any safer or less dangerous to deal with someone who is constantly hurting you out of ignorance than if they're doing it strategically. It might make you feel better to know that, but it affects nothing in reality at all. In point of fact, if they are doing it out of ignorance, that's arguably more dangerous, not less. People get very caught up in trying to figure out which one is happening when and all this, but in reality, this is actually a complete waste of time because it really has no bearing on anything at all in practical application. None. If you look at this situation objectively, you will see that. It doesn't matter. It is a favorite fantasy of people that if someone's hurting them out of ignorance or otherwise not completely maliciously, that person can somehow be educated out of their ignorance and therefore out of their behavior. But this is not that kind of ignorance. This is ignorance born of inability, not lack of information. This person does not have the ability to be educated out of their lack of empathy. Their behaviors are not the result of never being told that they're harming other people, for example. These things are the result of not being able to understand that or care about it. And the reason they can't do these things is because they don't have the capability. You are not the first person to try to make them understand, and you will likely not be the last. It is what it is. It's important to know, too, that none of this excuses the behavior of narcissists. It provides context for understanding what's happening and why. It demystifies and helps put in perspective very confusing behavior from very confusing people. It does not excuse this behavior. Whether it's malicious or whether it's not, nothing excuses it. This person is a grown adult and they are capable of making choices that don't harm other people. If they choose not to do that, they are responsible for their behavior. If you are dealing with a narcissist and they're always twisting things, it really helps to remember what this behavior is actually about. It is a desperate attempt from a very limited person to make reality into something that they can actually deal with. It doesn't mean anything. It's nonsense. It's noise. The reality is, pathologically narcissistic people live in a fantasy world. They really do, in the most fundamental sense of that phrase. They twist things to fit into the fantasy, sometimes because they really think that's what happened, and sometimes because they need to make it appear that way for their own reasons. Either way, they cannot deal with life and reality as is. They don't have the ability to see it or the coping skills to deal with it if they could see it. The best they can do is pretend that it's not true. Pretend that it's something else. It is really, really important to understand how much of this is really happening here. This person does not inhabit the same reality that you do. They really do not. Their perception and interpretation of you, of life, of the world, of themselves, of everything is entirely different than yours. This is not an act in the sense that, oh, they're just pretending to see things differently. No, they really do. If things happen that don't fit into their worldview, these things are ignored or they are reinterpreted to fit. Even when they are intentionally and strategically, consciously twisting things, it's not really because of any true misrepresentation of facts or reality. It's because what's true is what people believe. That's it. This is hard for rational people grounded in reality to understand, but you're dealing with a person who is neither of those things. Facts and reality mean nothing to them. This is both much more complex and much simpler than most people realize. Your view of things is complicated by facts and reality and what really happened. Theirs isn't. Those things hold no sway over these personalities whatsoever. They are not considered important at all, as you have likely already found out. What's true is what people believe. That's why they have to control the narrative and what other people think of them. Whatever people believe about narcissists becomes true. And if it's negative, this stays true unless and until the narcissist can find or create some opposing counter-reflection. To put it very simply, it's like Tinkerbell. The belief of others brings narcissists to life and makes them real. This really cannot be overstated. It's not a metaphor. It's not hyperbole. It's the truth of the situation. And if you think about it, you will see that that's how it is. When someone lives in a fantasy, when they live in an alternate reality, belief in that alternate reality is literally the only thing that concretizes it in any way. It's the only driving force behind it. And sadly, narcissists not only live in a fantasy, they are one. And it is only belief in this that makes them real. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, on Zoom and Skype for clients worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, seminars, and more throughout the year. So if you are interested in seeing what we are running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I have several books out for publication. So if you are interested in picking up a copy, you can do that on littleshaman.org or on amazon.com. And if you are interested in joining our support group with access to exclusive content, weekly support meetings, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast here on thelittleshaman.com, brought to you by Translational Healing, shamanspiritcenter.com, and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to the Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that isn't always understood about dealing with narcissists, and that is that narcissists want to effect a sort of identity swap with the people around them. They want to absorb the perceived positive qualities of those around them and transfer their perceived negative qualities onto others in return. This doesn't appear to be a conscious endeavor per se, but that has no effect on how damaging it can be, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. If you've heard the episode of the show entitled What People Actually Love About Narcissists, then you understand how narcissistic mirroring works. Narcissists can only experience themselves through the eyes of other people, and they live in a fantasy world besides. They have no real sense of identity, so they have to use external things to create one. This can unfortunately include the qualities, achievements, attitudes, beliefs, and anything else belonging to other people. Narcissists have a lot of difficulty differentiating themselves from external objects. This means that they can't really understand that the things around them are separate from them and exist independently of them. Kind of like the first time you ever saw your teacher outside of school as a kid and you realize, oh, she is a real person who exists in the world outside of your interactions with and your experiences of her. This is why narcissists assume that people see what they see, think what they think, believe what they believe, and on and on and on. It's very much like a child. External objects typically refers to people, but we can also often see this sort of over-identification with actual objects as well. Also with labels, words, dynamics. For example, many narcissists use external things like music, movies, a character on TV, a culture or a lifestyle, and many other things to create an identity. Now you might be thinking, well, lots of people do that. Certainly, lots of people identify with certain things, but they don't build an identity around the things. The things are an expression of their identity and their personality, not the other way around. If they lost the thing or the person or the environment or whatever, they would still be who and what they are. They don't need that thing or that person or that whatever to create or to know who they are. For narcissists, we actually see often that their identity is literally tied into the thing. You could say in a way that their identity is the thing, and the thing is their identity. If they lose it, they often have extreme difficulty coping until they find another thing. It's just the way that this psychological structure works. They have to find things to fashion into an identity because they don't really have one. And they can't experience themselves except through the reflections in the eyes of other people. So they need the trappings and the props and the costumes and whatever else to make that look real. If it looks real, others will believe in it. If others believe in it, the narcissist can see it and believe in it. If the narcissist can see it and believe in it, then it is real. This is how narcissists create some semblance of identity and self-image. It's not true identity or self-image. It's more like an identity narrative. However, this makes it no less important to the personality structure. When people express disbelief in that identity narrative or they refuse to believe in it, this often provokes rage from the narcissist whose entire identity is actually being threatened and invalidated by the person's refusal to go along with and agree with their performance of that identity as real and true and authentic. It often causes them to feel as though they're being erased or that their identity is being taken away from them. As you can see, other people figure hugely in this sort of pseudo-identity creation process. It is perhaps not too extreme to say that it can't even happen without other people's participation. Narcissists cannot create anything of their own. They must take from others in order to have anything. They can't feel like they won unless somebody else lost. They can't feel like they're right unless somebody else is wrong. They can't feel like they're the good guy unless somebody else is the bad guy. They need that perception from others in order to make it real for them, and they can only see that perception through other people's observed reactions to them, to the narcissist. This means they spend their time constantly comparing themselves to other people to see who and what they themselves are and engineering situations where they can try to create the necessary reactions in people so that who and what they see is something that they can tolerate. For example, you're at the monthly family dinner and you share with everybody that you got a promotion at work. Your narcissistic sister in law feels shamed by your share because anytime anybody achieves anything, this shames narcissists because they feel that they're going to be seen as less than in comparison. Doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter what it is. She now imagines that everyone is comparing her to you and is judging her as not as good as you, which is just a projection of what she herself is doing. In reality, no one but she is even thinking of her at all. And why would they be? The conversation has nothing to do with her. But for narcissists, everything is to and for and about and because of them. She might even imagine that you shared your good news on purpose, intending to make her look or feel bad, which then makes her feel attacked and angry on top of the shame. The fact that you would be sharing it for reasons that have nothing to do with her is not likely to be considered. It's doubtful she even thought of that. Everything is about her. Sometimes when people hear that, it doesn't really resonate with them how deep and fundamental this really is. Pathologically narcissistic people are not capable of seeing things a different way. They're not capable of understanding that people do things for their own reasons because they can't see that people exist outside of how that person relates to them. This means they can't really understand that people would have their own reasons. And if you listen to the things that they say, you will see that this is true. This is why you just being a person who exists and does things shames narcissists, because it really is all about them. Now, in order for a non narcissistic person to combat that feeling of shame, if they even experienced it at all, they would internally remind themselves of all the things that they have achieved. They would remind themselves that someone else's success is not a reflection on them, etc., etc. They would self soothe, in other words, using their own self image and their own self esteem and their own self stuff to regulate their emotions. Your hypothetical narcissistic sister in law cannot do this, though, because she has no self stuff, which means she has nothing with which to combat the feeling of shame. She may, in fact, have real achievements that she could remind herself of, but since she has no self stuff, since she emotionally owns nothing of her own and cannot see herself except through the eyes of others, this is not going to help her feel better. She must raise her perceived estimation in the eyes of everybody at the dinner table, which is to say, in her own eyes, because the reality is they don't truly see anything through the eyes of other people. It's all projection. Since she can't actually raise herself up, that means lowering everyone's perceived perception of you. The only way she can address the situation is to diminish your promotion or you personally in some other way. That way, you are now less than her in everyone's eyes as she sees it. Now she feels better because now she's more as she sees it. The fact that none of this is true or real doesn't mean anything. Her feelings are all the proof and therefore all the truth that she needs. In a very real way, she has replaced her feelings of shame and powerless vulnerability with your feeling of accomplishment, transferring her shame to you. Now you feel bad and she feels good, which we may translate into just not bad. She has tried to take something from you and use it to fortify herself, attempting to transfer into you her own empty negativity. If you've ever seen the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, then you know that the plot of the movie is about alien life forms that came to Earth and assumed the form of human beings. They were sort of shapeless, inanimate beings until they were able to absorb and appropriate things from an actual person who was within their vicinity. Once they took what they could from that person, the person ceased to exist, leaving only the alien duplicate. The duplicates looked like the people physically. They were able to copy memories, traits, and personalities, but they were devoid of human emotion. As we discussed in the episode of the show called The Big Con, this is reminiscent of the uncanny valley effect, which is the name given to the revulsion and negative reaction that we often see in people when robots or dolls look too much like people. We sometimes see it when people interact with psychopaths and narcissists too, and it appears to be for the same reason. It looks like a human being, but it doesn't feel like one somehow, and this creates a strong negative reaction in many people. It's theorized that this happens with things that are not human because instead of being identified as a robot who is poorly imitating a human, the robot appears so much like a human that the brain identifies the robot as a person who is not behaving naturally or correctly somehow. Following that logic, it becomes easy to see why this can happen with some narcissists and psychopaths too. Not surprisingly, the people in the movie could tell something was wrong. They insisted that the pod people who looked like their loved ones were duplicates or imposters of some kind, and so they were thought to be suffering from what are called Capgras delusions, which are delusions where people are able to physically recognize somebody that they know, but they don't emotionally recognize them. They don't have the emotional responses that humans have when they see familiar faces, so they believe them to be imposters that just look like their loved one or their friend. This can actually also happen with people's pets too. In a very real sense, this is how narcissistic personalities operate as well. They are, in their own way, shapeless and inanimate without the input of other people, without others to mimic and to use to create some kind of identity out of, and without others, maybe the same others, maybe not, to reflect this performed identity back to them. There's really nothing to this person. They are like a blank TV screen waiting for somebody to power them up and pick a channel. They are, in many ways, a hodgepodge of characteristics and things they picked up from other people, from media, from books, and whatever else, and sort of like pasted onto themselves in an attempt to be someone instead of no one. Narcissists interact only with two-dimensional created images of others, and they see only two-dimensional created images of themselves. They are truly imposter human beings in this sense because there really is nothing there of any substance at all. They never get to know you. You never get to know them because there's nothing to know. The entire relationship is an illusion made up of what each person imagines the other person to be. And it stays that way because they cannot be real and they won't allow you to be real to them either. There's another parallel to Invasion of the Body Snatchers that might be less obvious to some people because certainly the idea of duplicates that look and behave like human beings but have no emotions is a very clear and very obvious parallel regarding the experience of dealing with narcissists and psychopaths. Narcissists have emotions, of course. They're just often completely disconnected from them. But another parallel is that the people who were reporting that their loved ones were duplicates or imposters or otherwise like not normal human beings were deemed to be mentally ill in some way. Now, the situation presented in the movie is more dramatic, of course, and perhaps more understandable, but in so many situations, this is so similar to what happens to people who are dealing with narcissists. The situation is so incongruent to what other people can see, or so opposite of what other people can believe, that the victim is often told they're overreacting, they're imagining things, they're misunderstanding the situation, they're just wrong somehow about what's going on. This is very damaging and invalidating to victims of narcissistic abuse because they're already being gaslit so constantly from dealing with someone who is literally living in a different reality than they are. When they are also told by other people outside of that they must be wrong, this works to double down on the effect of the gaslighting that they are already receiving. The reality is, if people have not dealt with this, they genuinely do not understand. They might not see the things that you're talking about. They might not understand how these dynamics work. They may simply not be able to believe that this kind of thing really happens. Worse, if there's been any kind of smear campaigning or narrative control happening, they might believe some of the narcissist stories about how they've been victimized or mistreated by the victim. Unfortunately, this is extremely common. Along with attempting to take things from you and transfer things to you, this reversal of roles is another way of trying to perform the sort of invasion of the body snatchers identity swap that narcissists endeavor to create. They're not the bad guy, you are. They are the victim or the good guy or whatever, not you. Narcissists cannot actually steal your identity in the sense that we're talking about. They can perform pieces of it, and they can try to force you to assume or at least carry limited pieces of their own, but that's it. They don't really know your identity anyway. They just know an idealized or devalued version of their interpretation of it. It's like a reflection of a reflection in terms of how removed it is from the genuine article. It also takes some degree of work to do that. They have to constantly offload, rebuild. Reversing the roles in the way that we're describing here works much faster, requires less effort, and is more satisfying in some ways because instead of having to rely on their own hopefully convincing performance as a solo, they have somebody else to play off of, and this always works much better for them. Because they have nothing of their own, narcissists aren't usually a very compelling solo act. They often come across to others as extreme, either too much or too little, cartoonish, stereotypical, or just off somehow with their performance of what we might call quote-unquote normal people. And that's because it is a performance, and even the most convincing performance is still just a performance. There are always going to be places where you can see through it if you actually look. The problem is most people don't, and really, why would they? Who goes around examining and studying others to try to see who all is pretending to be something that they're not? This is how narcissists get by with it, even though in many, many situations, the act is really not that good. It's just that people don't know it's an act. They just think this is a different kind of person, maybe a little bit awkward, maybe a little bit weird, and that's if they notice it consciously at all. Unconsciously, people usually do notice things, but if their conscious brain can't identify what it is, it just registers as an impression that something is off or different about this person, or as a vague sort of feeling that something's wrong. It's hard to know what that something is because really it's everything, but it's also nothing that can really be identified or pinpointed, at least at first. It's like listening to a very familiar song being played in a slightly wrong key. Not necessarily an off key, just a wrong one. On one hand, it's totally wrong. On the other, it's exactly right. And because it's the whole song rather than just one or two off notes, it's harder to see what the problem is. The whole song is wrong, but at the same time, it's also right. All the words, instruments, structures, and formats are all there where they're supposed to be. This is the narcissist solo performance, a familiar rendition played in the wrong key. However, when they have somebody else to play off of, somebody else to contrast and compare themselves to, it usually ends up better for them, at least at first. Over time, the narcissist's inability to keep time and play in key will usually be actually more noticeable when performing with others, not less. But at first or in short bursts, they can seem to blend in very well. An act is still an act, and eventually theirs is seen through by most people. But in the short term or just for the moment, they can do very well with this strategy, especially when people don't understand what's happening or don't know what they should be paying attention to in the situation. In the movie, the pods could only take somebody over when the person was asleep, meaning when they were unaware of what was going on. They could not be utilized when they were awake and aware of what was going on. This, too, is a striking parallel to dealing with antisocial mimics such as narcissists and psychopaths as true prosocial assimilation, both of and into a society of other people, even of the limited superficial form that narcissists are trying to affect, is only possible when other people don't realize what's going on. If they are even somewhat aware, it fails. This doesn't mean that you can't be harmed by narcissists if you're aware of them, of course. They exist in real life. They are not physically bound by your belief in them the way a movie monster is, and they can definitely harm you. We've discussed many times how educating yourself about these dynamics is not enough to protect you, because it's not. It's like being in a room with poison gas. Knowing the gas is there does not make you capable of staying in the room and breathing in the gas. It does not protect you from the gas. It helps you to understand that in order to stop being poisoned, you have to get out of that room. This is the same thing. Knowing these things will not stop antisocial personalities from being able to harm you somehow if you interact with them. Nothing can stop that if they really want to do it and they're able to get to you. What it does mean is that you can't be forced to participate in the covert theft and resulting attempted erasure of your own identity when you are aware of what's going on. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via Zoom, via Skype, and through email for clients worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, seminars throughout the year. So if you are interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. If you're interested in joining our support group with access to exclusive content, weekly support meetings, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You have been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by Transrelational Healing and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to The Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that we're all really familiar with, and that is the opinions of narcissistic personalities. They often have very strong opinions, even when these opinions are based on nothing at all, and they're very often not afraid to express them, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. The formal definition of opinion is a view, judgment, or appraisal formed about a particular event, matter, or subject. Opinions are not facts, nor are they necessarily even based on facts. They carry a lot of weight in people's minds, though, and many times a person's opinion can carry more weight with them than actual facts. The opinions of people who are important to us usually carry a lot of weight for us, too, and when these important people include narcissists, this becomes very dangerous. There are many people who have ill-informed, ignorant opinions. There are many people who hear half of a story or who think they have the whole story when they don't, and come to conclusions or make judgments about all kinds of things. The mind makes judgments and comes to conclusions about everything all the time. Sometimes these things are fact and evidence-based, and sometimes they're not. Many people believe that opinions cannot be right or wrong. That's generally true about actual opinions, which are usually subjective and are more about preferences or impressions that can't really be quantified or proven either way. But many people also state things as facts and call them opinions. Things are not opinions just because a person says they are. For example, it's not my opinion if I say that the moon is made of green cheese. I'm incorrect about what the moon is made of. I'm not giving an opinion, I'm stating an incorrect fact. My belief in that doesn't make it valid or less incorrect, it's still wrong. If I said the moon looks like it's made of green cheese, that is an opinion. This isn't something that can be proven or disproven, it can only be agreed with or disagreed with. Facts are different. Facts are things that can be proven and quantified. Facts don't need to be agreed or disagreed with in order to be valid. They still are. Disagreeing with them doesn't change anything. You can dislike the speed limit and you can be wrong about the speed limit, but the speed limit is still what the speed limit is. It's a fact. You can dislike the weather and you can be wrong about the weather, but this has no impact on what the weather actually is. If it's raining, then it's raining, whether somebody agrees that it's raining or not. That's the difference between facts and opinions. Facts can be quantified and proven. Narcissists are notorious for their difficulty with facts. They don't seem to really understand the difference between opinions and facts or feelings and facts. Even those who don't have temper tantrums or meltdowns when they're presented with contradictory facts might say things like, well, I agree to disagree, not seeming to realize that this is not even a situation where that applies. You can't agree to disagree about facts. Something's either true or it's not. You can dislike facts, but you can't disagree that they are facts. For narcissists, though, their opinions are facts because, in their opinion, these things are quantifiable and provable. Because narcissists are pathologically egocentric, they legitimately have no understanding of other people's perspective. There's no understanding that there could be other interpretations of things or that there are different ways of looking at something. To them, their opinion is as incontrovertible as looking outside and seeing that it's raining. It can't be argued with, and everybody who saw it would see the same thing because that is very clearly what's happening. There's a very old saying about what opinions are like and how many people have one. Even when someone is reasonable, they can still have opinions that are ill-informed or not based on facts. However, most reasonable people try to at least look at and consider facts. They are at least willing to look at and consider evidence even if it contradicts their opinion. When someone is a narcissist, this is generally not the case at all. They cannot see anything outside of their own interpretations or conclusions, and anything else is considered extraneous at best, and at worst, it's considered manipulative as an attempt to trick or convince them of something false. Due to their mental gymnastics, narcissists are able to consider their own opinions as facts, but actual facts as just other people's opinions. This appears to happen because they genuinely don't understand the difference between these two things. Because they're egocentric, facts don't exist for them as things which are true in and of themselves and remain true even independent of anybody's agreement with them. It appears to be much, much more simple than that. Something is a fact if the narcissist believes it or agrees with it, and not a fact if they don't. Stating and believing that a fact is just someone else's opinion is a way of denying that it is, in fact, a fact. As we've discussed in several previous podcasts, most recently Decoding Narcissistic Communication, narcissistic personalities often have extreme difficulty with many aspects of processing information. This means they very frequently come to erroneous or incorrect conclusions, particularly regarding emotionally charged events. Their rigid thinking and serious difficulty integrating new information makes it very hard for them to alter a conclusion once it's been established in their minds. For narcissists, their conclusions, judgments, appraisals, and views are much more than just opinions. They are more even than facts. They become concretized into part of a narrative that supports whatever pseudo-identity they're trying to live out. These personalities don't have a stable identity or self-image. They have to try to create one with whatever they have available. In the absence of anything more substantial, narcissistic personalities attempt to create an identity out of even superficial things, like their opinions about entertainment media or sports teams. They attach their identity to these things, which makes the things very important. Narcissists will fight like tigers to defend their opinions because they're much more than just opinions. This is why they react so poorly to being corrected, challenged, or disagreed with. This is taken not as a simple disagreement or a difference in actual opinion, meaning having different preferences or subjective impressions, but as a challenge to their deepest beliefs about themselves, as a threat to the narrative they need to believe in order to survive. They take this very, very personally. The subject of the disagreement, challenge, or correction doesn't really matter. It could be which waffles are best, or how many stuffed animals is too many, or whether it's 99 degrees outside or 100. It always somehow ends up that you are attacking them on the deepest, most personal level and must be punished for that. It always somehow ends up that they're the victim. Even when dealing with narcissists who don't use that exact verbiage or who don't blatantly accuse others of anything, if you listen to what they're actually saying, you will realize that the bottom line is always the same. They are the victim somehow. This isn't just about protecting a very fragile, unstable identity either, though that would be reason enough for the reactions that we commonly see. There is also a large amount of toxic shame embedded in the narcissistic personality structure, and a huge amount of it is being triggered by not being right. In the narcissist black and white perception, not being right is shameful and therefore destabilizing on a level that people who are not narcissists probably cannot even begin to understand. The basic gist of this particular situation is that if someone disagrees with you, or if there's another way to see something, then you're not right. Because of the toxic shame, that is intolerable to narcissistic personalities. Not only does not being right trigger shame in narcissists, it destabilizes them. Because they don't have stable identities and because they have such difficulty processing and integrating information, among other very serious and fundamental problems, the idea that they might be wrong about something undermines any confidence or stability they might be experiencing in that moment, which is how narcissists appear to exist, moment by moment. Due in part to their very severe black and white thinking, catastrophizing, and other cognitive distortions, as well as their complete lack of trust in their own information vetting skills, narcissists often conclude that if they are wrong about one thing, they could be wrong about everything. There's no ability to just be wrong about something and that be all it is or all it means. It's much bigger and much more higher stakes than that. It simply cannot be allowed because the implications surrounding it are too big. So to defend against it, they refuse to even entertain it. It's just not true, and that's it. This can result in some pretty bizarre situations and in behavior that comes across as even delusional or crazy. Things like denying obvious facts, making weird and paranoid accusations, attempting to gaslight people in very obvious or absurd ways, and much more. It's important to remember that the things they're saying in these situations may or not be things they actually believe, but the point of saying them has nothing to do with whether they're true or not. The point is to deny the things that the narcissist needs to believe are false, and however they have to get to that doesn't matter. If they have to say things that make no sense, or throw people under the bus, or come across as completely delusional, then that's what they'll do. It doesn't matter because they can live with that, because they won't live with it. They'll just create a narrative where that's not how it is. What they can't live with is allowing things that contradict their main narrative to exist unchallenged. That simply cannot be tolerated, and it will not be allowed. We've said it before on this show, and we will say it many more times because it's one of the most important things to understand about dealing with narcissists. These people are an illusion. They are, in many ways, completely phony. Not perhaps in a conscious, purposeful way for many of them. It's actually worse than that. These personalities spend all of their time and focus constructing, shoring up, and constantly repairing against challenges, a reality they can deal with. And generally speaking, it often has no resemblance to actuality at all. In the absence of a stable identity and no ability to self-regulate emotions, self-image, self-worth, or anything else, the only way narcissists have to self-regulate and stabilize is that they have a narrative/identity that they can perform to induce others to see them the way they want to be seen so that they themselves can then see themselves the same way. Without a stable identity or self-image, this is how they attempt to stabilize and regulate themselves. Because their reality is not congruent with real life, it's constantly in jeopardy and constantly being damaged by facts, by actuality. This is extremely stressful for narcissistic personalities, and a large amount of their time and focus is spent repairing this damage, mostly in the form of denial, but also in other ways as well. It's easy to see then why their opinions are more than just opinions for them. They are part of the patchwork used to shore up a very fragile, completely unrealistic existence. It is perhaps not understood very well by many people how extremely fragile these personalities really are. A large majority of narcissists appear to be unable to deal with almost anything in life as adult human beings. They seem unable to make sense out of the world or the people in it in any real way. They often have enormous difficulty making even small decisions. They don't seem to really understand the majority of their communications and interactions with anybody. They have a very hard time trying to understand or communicate their emotions, thoughts, or needs. They can't deal with things not going the way they thought things would go. They can't deal with being corrected, challenged, or criticized, even gently. They can't deal with being told no, being told to wait, and they can't deal with their own constant negative emotional experiences. And again, even those who don't appear to have these difficulties very often do demonstrate them if you pay attention. Narcissists are, of course, not the only people who have difficulties with these things, but their difficulties with all of these things and many more are often pretty extreme, and they are among the only people who deal with it by attacking, blaming, abusing, and punishing others for it. One of the most damaging things about dealing with narcissistic personalities, then, would be their opinions of other people. These also often have no resemblance to actuality. Whether in a positive or a negative light, the opinions and images that narcissists hold of others are usually outside of objective experience, sometimes very far outside of objective experience. This sometimes upsets people to hear because they want to believe that when the narcissist saw them in a positive light, that was all real. It's not real though. Their positive images of people are just as extreme and incorrect as their negative ones. It's a common narrative that narcissists target people for their light or because of how special they are and because these people have things that the narcissist does not have. That's actually true in a way, but you also have to remember this applies to literally everybody. Narcissists are so empty and so limited that literally every single other person on the planet has many, many things that they don't have. Once again, this often upsets people to hear because they want to believe that. And it makes sense. After the beating their sense of self, self-esteem, self-image, and sometimes even their physical body have taken at the hands of a selfish, insensitive, compassionless, artless, often intentionally cruel personality. Most information focuses on the false negative things narcissists say during devaluation, but the reality is the false positive things they say during idealization are just as harmful and damaging. They are a big part of the reason the devaluation is so painful, and this needs to be recognized because they're not actually true. You're not the most amazing person who ever lived. You're not the smartest person in the world. You're not their only chance at happiness or the miracle worker who could heal anybody with your kind benevolence. And you know what? That's okay. You don't need to be any of these things to be a great person who totally rocks. The narrative that we are targeted by narcissists because we're special in some way is understandable and it's attractive, but in some ways it's also very similar to the artificial ego inflation that narcissists engage in during love bombing and idealization, and because of that, it isn't really helpful for recovery. It often makes people feel better, but actually healing from these situations does require more than that. The best thing for victims of the ego trauma and character assassination inflicted by narcissistic personalities is to be able to see themselves realistically and be legitimately, genuinely good with that. If it's too painful to accept that the idealized version of ourselves is not real, then that needs to be explored because this is a vulnerability that can be exploited by manipulation. Seeing ourselves unrealistically actually increases our vulnerability to narcissistic relationships, and not just because we might be more susceptible to negative claims about ourselves. It's also because when a narcissist's idealized image of a person and that person's idealized image of themselves coincide, it causes them to feel like the narcissist is truly seeing and understanding them in a way nobody else ever does or ever has. This is totally false, but it creates a fantasy about themselves and about the narcissist that most people find very hard to let go of. This is what is meant by when you fall in love with a narcissist, you've fallen in love with yourself. Not only are they mimicking your behavior and things like that, but they're reflecting an idealized image of yourself back to you. That is really what initially captivates most people in these situations. It isn't that the narcissist themselves was so amazing, it's that they treated you like you were. People sometimes spend decades in these relationships trying to get back to that without realizing that none of it was ever based in reality at all. In reality, what narcissists do, and all they do, is alternate between false, overly idealized images of people and false, overly devalued ones. They do not ever see anybody for who they actually are, and this includes themselves. When we can see ourselves realistically, then we can see this much more clearly. Their opinion loses importance. It loses any weight that it might have had because we can see that good or bad, it's not based in reality, and it makes no sense when it's compared to who we actually are. The manipulations from narcissistic people are almost completely ego-based. Ego is the part of you that speaks as I. That means narcissistic manipulation targets your sense of self and who you believe yourself to be. And that's true. During idealization, they create a narrative of how perfect, selfless, beautiful, powerful, amazing, intelligent, whatever that you are. And during devaluation, they create a narrative of how flawed, selfish, awful, cruel, abusive, stupid, unsuccessful, whatever that you are. These things can never be brought together into a more realistic, cohesive picture of a person due to the narcissistic personality's cognitive distortions and inability to understand whole object relations. They think in black and white terms, and narcissists are very extreme. It's one or the other. And if you're one, you're the best one of that. And if you're the other, you're the worst one of that. They will continue to have one completely negative image of you and one completely positive image of you that they simply alternate between back and forth based on how they feel in any moment. Idealization occurs in part because narcissists are so fragile, so grandiose, and so envious that they can only attach themselves to things that are viewed as perfect somehow so as to benefit in some way by association. Anything that makes them feel good will be idealized. Devaluation occurs in part because narcissists are so fragile, have so much shame, and think so lowly of themselves that the only way they can feel as though they're better than somebody is that the person has to have no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Anything which makes them feel bad will be devalued. When we can understand that, we can start to disengage ourselves from caring about their opinions of us, because the reality is, that's all this is. No matter how cruel and horrible, and it can be very cruel and very horrible, no matter how damaging and hurtful and upsetting the things that they say really are, all it boils down to is an opinion. And to be honest, this is the ridiculous, unrealistic opinion of a person who is essentially delusional, who cannot live in reality, who does not understand what it means to be human, even though they are one, who has never seen you or anyone else, including themselves, for who they actually are. Ever. To be brutally honest, their opinion of you is worth nothing in that regard. It's not based on anything except the stilted, rigid, distorted way they view the world through their own distorted, rigid feelings and beliefs. It's not a fact. It might not even be how they feel in 10 minutes from now. It's not based in reality at all. And considering the truly limited understanding most of these personalities have regarding the world at large, you might as well be attaching serious importance to the opinion of a toddler. Seriously. The more realistically you are able to see yourself, the more you are able to really understand what you are and also what you're not, the more you're able to remind yourself of what you're actually dealing with here, the more clearly you'll be able to see all of this. And then it won't be able to affect you anymore because you'll be able to see it for what it is. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, and seminars throughout the year, so if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. We've opened up subscriptions to the YouTube channel, so if you're interested in what we're offering there, you can follow the link in the video description. And if you'd like to join our support group with access to exclusive content, weekly meetings, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about dealing with narcissistic people just in general. It's always better not to deal with narcissists and other people who have proven themselves to be toxic if you can help it. However, there may be times when you need to deal with them, such as at your job or if you share custody of children. In these situations, it's best to have some tools that you can utilize to help. This channel has several episodes of the show about that, where we cover things like gray rocking, keeping the conversation short, not offering extra information, and other things you can do to protect yourself and reduce the stress caused by interacting with this kind of person. You can't control them, of course, and you can't make them stop their behavior or choose to behave differently, but you can work to reduce the stress it causes you. However, probably the most stressful and damaging thing about dealing with pathologically narcissistic people in particular is the differing realities. In many ways, narcissistic people live in a different reality than you do. Their reality is dictated by fantasy, beliefs, and feelings, not facts. Now, of course, fantasy, beliefs, and feelings influence everyone's experiences on some level, but usually not to the degree that we see in pathologically narcissistic personalities. For example, most people fit their feelings to the facts. That means their emotions are related to factual things that happened. Someone said something rude to me, then I felt angry. Someone said something confrontational to me, then I felt defensive. Someone said something mean to me, then I felt hurt. For narcissists, their feelings dictate the facts. It's backwards. So it might look something more like, I felt angry, then I perceived that someone was being rude to me. I felt defensive, then I perceived that someone was being confrontational toward me. I felt hurt, then I perceived someone was being mean. You might have heard me say many times, you can't worry about not upsetting narcissists because narcissists are already upset. Because they can't take ownership of their emotions, narcissists will generally experience this as the other person causing their feelings. Their experience of the situation appears to be roughly the same as your experience of an emotional response to events, even if in practice it's not the same. Except many times with narcissists, the feelings don't match the facts. In other words, they seem to experience this as emotionally responding to an event just like everybody else does, even though that's not what it is. But their interpretation of the events often makes no sense, even in that context. It makes sense to feel attacked and get angry if someone calls you a rude name. It does not make sense to feel attacked and get angry if someone asks you to take the garbage out. There is often a disconnect between a narcissist's subjective experience, their emotional experience, and the objective reality, the factual things that happened. This causes enormous distress for people who have to interact with them. One of the ways to deal with this is to stay grounded in your reality. It's important to remember that it's very likely that your version of reality doesn't make any more sense to a narcissist than their version of reality makes to you. They don't think like you. They don't experience things the way that you do, and they don't perceive or interpret them the same way that you do. They just don't. And you're not going to be able to make them see it your way any more than they can make you see it their way. The two experiences are not compatible, and they may not even be remotely similar. This person is having a very different experience than you are, and remembering that will help you resist the urge to try to explain to them that their version of events is incorrect or mistaken. It does no good anyway. It only serves to convince them that you're untrustworthy or perhaps even dangerous to them. It's also possible that sometimes they're just lying. People often get bogged down in trying to decipher if it's one or the other, but the truth is, it doesn't even matter. In the end, the result is the same whether someone's lying about what happened or whether they really do remember it differently, because you can't change it either way. Most likely, it's a combination of both, just like it is with everybody else in the world. As with people who are not narcissists, there are some things that they lie about and some things that they're wrong about. However, if this happens all the time, and if their perception of events and their subjective experiences are vastly different from yours, the way it is with pathologically narcissistic people, you can't get anywhere with this at all. It would be like two people who saw two totally different movies trying to talk about them as if they're the same movie. This is not a conversation that can even be had, so learn to stop trying to have it. Narcissists need other people to validate their reality for survival, which is why they push about this so hard. But you don't need them to validate yours to know the truth. They won't anyway, either because they genuinely didn't experience it the way that you did, or because admitting the truth is not considered safe by them. You're not going to get what you want. All you will get is confusion, stress, and invalidation. Learn to trust yourself so that you can validate your own experiences, and you don't need to rely on someone who is unstable and manipulative. It's important to remember, too, that you're dealing with someone who, at the very least, has extremely disordered and dysfunctional thinking, and who, at the most, is using that dysfunctional thinking to try to intentionally confuse and manipulate you. Either way, you have to truly consider the source. This person is not exactly reliable when it comes to perceiving reality or reporting what they do perceive honestly. Learning to remember this and remind yourself of it helps enormously with the terrible stress and confusion caused by someone relentlessly trying to force you into a reality that does not match your own experiences. As we discussed in the episode of the show called Narcissists Are Like a Magic Trick, the human brain relies on input from the eyes and the ears for survival. Things you know to be true are going to take a back seat to that. This means if you know that narcissists are unstable and disordered, but they're standing in front of you, seeming to be reacting and responding normally, your brain is going to want to believe what it sees. It's going to put more stock in that. This can make the confusion in these situations much worse, and it's one of the many reasons no contact is so important. When you are dealing with this kind of person, remind yourself who you are dealing with and how they are, and keep reminding yourself so that you don't allow yourself to be forced into the position of defending your own reality against something that doesn't match up with anything that you have experienced or can understand. This is an unwinnable battle, and being forced to defend your reality undermines it. Remember that this person cannot and will not make any space for your perspective at all. Their reality is so fragile and so dependent on validation from other people that they just can't do that. You will not convince them or even make them consider it. The only thing you might succeed at doing is undermining your own reality and possibly even confusing yourself. It also helps to remember that everybody's different, and because everybody is different, there are some things that you're just not going to be able to understand. Nobody is going to react or think or believe or feel or experience the same way that you do. They are a different person with completely different life experiences, thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and everything else. They have a different mind, different body, different spirit. Some people are really, really different from you. They are so different that you're not going to be able to understand or make sense out of some of the things they say or that they do. Learn to be okay with that, because worrying about it is just going to cause you serious stress, and you can't do anything about it. Some things are too different to understand, and that's okay. It has to be okay because it is what it is. You don't need to understand everything, because what you already know is enough. You also don't have to automatically validate the experiences of other people. We're always told to validate other people's experiences, and we should, but there does come a point where this can become absurd. Validating someone else's subjective experience when it is so far outside of an objective experience is not only not helpful, it can be dangerous, especially for you. Validating a narcissist's experience, for example, helps make it real for them. If that experience is that you are evil or otherwise trying to hurt them, this can go very badly for you. Of course, they're still going to believe what they believe regardless, but it's not a good idea to help that along by validating it for them, and addressing it at all is validating it in these situations. Don't get in the weeds with a narcissist in this way, talking about what the definition of is, or arguing with blatant, absurd gaslighting, or being fed a bunch of word salad. Validate yourself. People don't need to agree with your experience in order for it to be valid. It's valid on its own, but you have to believe that. You have to act on that. You have to stay grounded in that. To help you do that, remind yourself often that you know what happened. Some people find it helpful to write things down in a journal or make backups of digital communications. Other people record themselves talking about what happened or make a record of conversations that they're having with people who report different realities or who they believe to be gaslighting them. Reality testing your conclusions to see if they make sense can help a lot here as well. Using these things to remind yourself that you do understand what's going on can be extremely helpful, and when you learn to trust yourself more to validate your experiences, you're not going to need to do that anymore. On littleshaman.org's Learning Tree section, there is a self-paced workshop you can take to help with that. It's called Rebuilding Trust with Yourself After Abuse. You could also join us for any of our live virtual workshops as well. In the end, the best way to stay grounded in your reality is to deal with this kind of person as little as possible. There is no way for it not to affect you at least a little bit if you're around it, so the best idea is to go no contact and stay no contact if you possibly can. If you can't, always consider the source. Always remind yourself that you know what's happening. Others not agreeing with that doesn't change anything. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year. So if you're interested in seeing what we are running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. And if you are interested in joining our support group, where we meet several times monthly with access to exclusive content and more, you can find that on littleshaman.org as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something many people deal with in narcissistic relationships, and that is a phenomenon that is often called word salad. In clinical applications, the term word salad is often used to describe the way people speak who are suffering from schizophrenia or after they have a stroke. It's involuntary and usually involves stringing words together that don't make sense, or using words as if they are related or as if they are synonyms when they're not. You can see many examples of this kind of word salad on YouTube. When people talk about word salad when they're referencing narcissists, they're usually talking about a collection of tactics designed to frustrate and destroy meaningful communication. It's similar in that it usually involves contradictions and nonsensical phrasing or behaving as though things are related when they're not. However, it's not involuntary and unconscious the way it is for people who have suffered a stroke or who are dealing with schizophrenia. It appears to be an intentional attempt to derail the conversation so that they don't have to hear what you're going to say. This doesn't mean, of course, that there's any intelligent, master manipulative plan behind it. Maybe they don't even realize how it works, but it's definitely intentional. As you've heard me say many times, narcissists are fragile people. They are perpetually terrified of the truth about themselves and will go to great lengths not to have to hear it. If they believe you're going to say something that's going to be hurtful, which they often believe that, they will do anything to avoid that and to keep themselves in a power position in the situation so that they don't have to feel hurt or vulnerable. That can look like repeatedly interrupting and talking over you, refusing to listen or to respond to what was actually said, trying to tell you what you're, quote, really saying or what you, quote, really mean, responding to arguments that you haven't made or things that you haven't even said, assigning motives to you or your actions, attempting to, quote, interpret your body language, tone, or choice of words, continuously trying to change the subject or move the goalpost, using variations of, I know you are, but what am I? Using variations of whataboutism, which is where you say they did something or you call their attention and they say, oh yeah, well, what about you? You did this. Becoming violent or hysterical, refusing to speak or walking away, stonewalling you, accusing you of starting a fight or picking on them, accusing you of being abusive, of being cruel, or of never being satisfied with them, that they're never good enough, shaming you for your feelings, your needs, or your concerns, saying you are confusing them or that they don't understand, and of course, gaslighting, projection, blame shifting, shame dumping. The use of these tactics is very confusing for people who are just trying to have a conversation about something that's bothering them. They are unaware of the intense shame that narcissistic personalities operate under and don't realize that even the tiniest hint of a thought of criticism sends these personalities into a shame-induced tailspin that can be disastrous for them if they can't get out of it. So they project, they blame, they gaslight, they refuse to listen, they interrupt, they walk away, they do whatever they can do to stop the conversation from happening. The fact that the conversation may not actually have gone horribly if they didn't act out based on their irrational fears in the first place does not seem to ever occur to them. They don't seem to ever realize they are creating the things that they are supposedly so afraid of. And of course, sometimes they want conflict. They have no way to process or hold negative emotions. They have to simply vent them. Creating conflict is a good way to do that. This is especially helpful for them because narcissistic personalities take no ownership over their own emotions. If they feel bad, someone must have done something to make them feel bad. Someone must have caused these feelings. So they look around for who or what that must have been, and they can usually find it. That's how we get to the constant insistence that they did not cause the problem. You did. That's how we get the endlessly frustrating assertion that they're just defending themselves, and you're standing there saying, against what? You're defending yourself against what? Part of the reason word salad occurs too is because narcissistic people are often not listening to you or any of your points. You have clearly seen this if you've ever asked them what they think your point is or to repeat anything you said in the last 5 minutes. They have no idea. It's as if they were listening to somebody else talk, someone who was saying completely different things than you were, most likely their own thoughts about what you were saying. So they respond to that, and it makes no sense. This is sometimes where people get the impression that narcissists have a script that they're following. They seem to be reciting lines that don't fit in with what's happening. Many narcissists also seem sometimes to have only heard the last few words you said. So if you say, if I didn't care about you, I wouldn't be here, I would have left years ago, they hear, I should have left years ago, and that's all. Then they respond to that, getting your entire point totally wrong and launching into a brand new diatribe about that, or walking away, or raging. It's pointless to even bother arguing with any of this. They're not listening. Nothing you are saying is landing or being understood at all. You might as well not be talking. Another feature of word salad is the contradiction. Narcissistic people are like children in many ways, and in an argument, many of them are often simply just trying to say that you're wrong about everything, no matter what. Many times, in trying to relentlessly contradict you, they contradict themselves without being aware of it. This seems to be because they have no real point other than just that you're wrong, and they have to refute everything that you say. So if you're having an argument and they're saying that you don't help with anything and all you ever do is sit around, you might counter that by saying how much you work, only to be told that all you ever do is work and you ignore them. You're left completely unable to understand their point because they don't have one. This seems to be just a knee-jerk contradiction without even thinking about what they're saying, and it can end up making them sound really ridiculous and even crazy. Even if they don't continually contradict you, many narcissists will use the last few words you said to continually try to change the subject to something else. This is how these conversations can get dragged so far off point. So you say, stick to the topic. I'm tired of you dragging the conversation down all these blind alleys. And they say, you mean like when you made me wait in that alley for an hour when you were at work? Or says the person who keeps changing the subject so we never talk about them. This kind of thing just destroys communication completely because you can't get anywhere at all. You can't even get a response to anything you actually said. It's just nonstop chaos that goes nowhere. Something that happens too that people might be unaware of is that pathological narcissists are mimics. Many of them simply repeat things that they've heard or that they've read other people say. To that end, they may routinely use phrases and words that they don't really understand. This results in nonsensical conversations or things being said that make no sense in the context of the discussion. For example, they may use a cliche phrase incorrectly, misuse a common metaphor, or use a word that doesn't mean what they think it means. Interestingly, this does not seem to respond to correction, and they may continue to do it even after they've been told multiple times that they're saying something wrong or that they're using a word wrong. This is probably because, again, they're not really listening. In the end, there's no way to deal with this in any successful way. It is designed to destroy communication completely. Their goal is to stop the conversation from going anywhere, and these tactics work very well. You can't force someone to behave like an adult. You can't force someone to learn how to do something they don't want to do and have no real ability to learn anyway. There is no magic phrase or key word that can make them stop doing this or that will magically pierce through the defensiveness and the BS so that they will listen to you. It is what it is. Narcissists live in a fantasy world because they are legitimately and deeply traumatized by truth and reality. You are speaking truth and reality. That's like handing a tarantula to a person with arachnophobia. It's never going to be what you're hoping it will. The best thing you can do is learn to spot these things so you can stop wasting your time and stop frustrating yourself by engaging in meaningless chaos for no reason. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, and seminars throughout the year. So if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. We have a support group that meets multiple times monthly, 2 times a week, and includes a spot in all monthly workshops. So if you're interested in joining that or seeing what it's all about, you can do that on littleshaman.org as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that is really common when dealing with narcissistic people, and that is the idea that we can become educated enough to deal with narcissists and not be harmed by the relationship. This is a mistake that many people make, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. When you're dealing with narcissistic loved ones, it may have crossed your mind that educating yourself about the dysfunction could be a viable way to preserve the relationship. Yes, they are toxic, and yes, they are hurtful, but if you can learn how to defeat or circumvent that, you can continue the relationship. It doesn't have to end. You can learn to deal with them and fortify yourself enough to where the relationship does not harm you. The problem with this is, it's not true. Understanding narcissism does not protect you from the damage of dealing with narcissists. If you are around a narcissist all the time, you're not going to be able to protect yourself from this damage. It is intrinsic to the interaction. Even if you learn not to take things personally, this is still the case. Our brains function a certain way, and they will continue to function that way for the rest of our lives. You will continue to try to be understood and heard by this person. You will continue to try to interact with them the way you interact with every other human being. You will continue to try to have your reality validated. You will continue to try and reason with them. You will continue to try to bond and reach out, and it will all continue to fail. The reason is because regardless of how much you understand, there are certain things that have to happen in order for humans to interact and communicate with each other. These things do not happen with narcissists, and understanding why they don't happen does not change anything when it comes to the nuts and bolts of dealing with another person, because they still just don't happen. Educating yourself cannot change that, and it doesn't somehow make this not a problem anymore. You will continue to project onto the narcissist in your life and fill in the gaps for them because you won't be able to help it. Narcissists have big blank spaces where things like empathy and a basic understanding should be. And assuming these things are there is essential for humans to be able to interact with each other. Your brain makes this jump automatically, and it will continue to do so because it's responding to your eyes and your ears telling it that you're dealing with a functioning adult person even though you're actually not. You may intellectually know that, but it's very difficult to override your brain's built-in reliance on your eyes and ears, especially if you're around this person all the time. The fact that they are not out of control, crazy, cold, silent, or whatever way they're horrible all the time is all it really takes to fool your brain into believing that they can be interacted with in the same way as everybody else, because sometimes they can be. This is one of the many reasons we say no contact is the only real option. Your brain is simply not going to be able to deal with the contradiction. It will continue to make the same assumptions it always makes, and it will continue to be wrong. This is unavoidable, and you're not going to be able to intellectualize your brain out of doing it. It will continue to happen, and it will continue to cause pain and problems. Understanding narcissism and educating yourself about narcissists also doesn't somehow make it possible to successfully coexist with a person who lives in a completely different reality than you do. Knowing this is happening and why doesn't change the actuality of it or make the act of dealing with it any easier. It is what it is. And knowing how or why it is doesn't change anything at all. It's still a massive and fundamental problem in any relationship, and it's a problem for which there is no actual solution. You see, the problem in the relationship with your narcissistic parent or partner or sibling is not that you didn't know what was happening. That is a problem. It is not the problem. The problem is that trying to have any kind of a relationship with a narcissist is not going to work. This person doesn't think like you think. They don't feel like you feel. They don't do what you do. They don't say what you say. They don't believe what you believe. They don't see what you see. Period. Understanding that these things are true is not going to fix them or make them somehow less of a problem. The intense stress and exhaustion of dealing with this kind of personality does not go away because we now know why we are stressed and why we're exhausted. And neither do the constant conflicts and issues that their problems cause. Those don't go away either. People often say, yeah, but now that I understand it, I can deal with it. This usually stems from the idea that not taking abuse personally takes its power over you away. That can be true to a certain point, and it will certainly help your mental health. But first of all, you can't manage ongoing abuse like that. It won't work. Abuse gets to anyone eventually if they keep being exposed to it. Second of all, the abuse is not even the only problem. It's just the most obvious, most dangerous problem. As unbelievable as this might sound, the horrific and relentless abuse in these relationships is actually just a symptom of the much deeper and much bigger problems these personalities have. It's the tip of a very large iceberg. Even if you could somehow learn to ignore the abuse or not take it personally to the point that it ceased to be a factor, which you can't do, all of the rest of the huge and fundamental problems in these relationships are all still there. Narcissists still live in a different reality. They still have problems with empathy. They still see people as objects. They still cannot communicate. They still don't see you as you really are. They still avoid problems by any means necessary. They still don't listen. They still lie. They still gaslight. They still attempt to manipulate. They still misinterpret your words. They still mischaracterize your actions. They still underperform. They still don't bond with other people. They still don't trust anybody. They still utilize a false self. They still never believe they've done anything wrong. None of this is changed by understanding narcissists, and the enormous constant problems these things cause do not simply disappear just because now you're not taking it personally. Even if you don't take anything personally, if you expect absolutely nothing from them at all, the relationship still can't function. It's not a relationship. It's essentially a play that you're putting on where you're pretending you're having an actual adult relationship with this person and that they are a real participant in it. If that happens to be what you're looking for, then this will be perfect. If you're looking for a real relationship, it's going to be a terrible disappointment, and understanding why it's disappointing is not going to change that. The truth is, when you understand pathologically narcissistic personalities, you understand that relationships with them are not possible. You can still live with them, or sleep with them, or visit them for holidays, or have frequent, even daily interactions with them, but it isn't an actual relationship in any sense of the word. Educating yourself regarding pathologically narcissistic personalities is very important. It helps you move on and heal from the trauma sustained in narcissistic relationships. It helps you to protect yourself going forward, to prevent yourself from getting into another damaging traumatic relationship. However, understanding narcissists will not save or repair your relationship with a narcissist. If you are still in a relationship with a narcissist, the only thing understanding narcissists really helps you to do is understand why the relationship isn't going to work. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics several times throughout the year. So if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. And if you are interested in joining our support group with multiple meetings throughout the month and access to exclusive content, among other things, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com, Transrelational Healing, and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that doesn't get enough attention in the conversation about narcissists, and that is how boring narcissists can be. For all that we hear about how enigmatic and magnetic and chaotic that pathologically narcissistic people can be, it's often left out of the conversation how boring they can be. The reality is, dealing with narcissistic personalities on a regular basis can often be extremely boring, almost mind-numbingly boring and empty, devoid of any true content. When you first meet them, narcissistic personalities can seem very engaging. They might have lots of stories and anecdotes or jokes and lines of patter. Maybe they have theories or points. The problem is, once you've heard all of these a few times, you start to realize that that's all there really is. It's like they have a Rolodex of intelligent things to say or interesting points to make, and once those are all used up, that's it. There are no more. Anything starts to get tiresome after you've heard it 50 times. And this is particularly true with narcissistic personalities because since so much of what they offer is just mimicry, memorization, and repetition anyway, there's not really any possibility for deeper conversation about anything they say. Even if they do actually know about what they're talking about or understand it in more than a surface way, they often take any attempts to probe deeper or asking questions as invasive and threatening, perhaps as an implication that they're wrong or they don't really know what they're talking about. And of course, many times they actually don't. So this fear is warranted, even though the people who are asking the questions usually don't know that. The narcissist wants to make sure they don't find out, so questions are often ignored in some way, answered in a circular fashion, treated as hostile, and responded to in the same fashion, hostilely, deflected somehow, or otherwise just not answered. If asking questions or trying to gain a deeper understanding of something is not permitted, conversation can't survive. Couple this with the fact that narcissists tend to respond with hostility to questions and to interest in general because they find it threatening, and conversation not only can't survive, but it often goes horribly wrong. The truth is, the emotional chaos of narcissists is easily the most quote-unquote interesting thing about them, and even that can become boring. How many times can you watch the same fireworks display or the same building being blown up before it's just not exciting or captivating anymore? This includes the seemingly positive emotional chaos, like what we see in love bombing and idealization. Once people realize that the strong, intense emotions that they are reading from this person have nothing to actually do with them, but are literally only for and about the narcissist, they realize how empty this all really is. Some narcissists may seem enigmatic and magnetic at first because they're hard to read. Because they don't have a strong, cohesive sense of self, and because much of what they're putting out is an act, they don't seem to make sense to people's radar, which can trigger a desire to sort of like, quote, solve the mystery or figure them out. It is a bitter disappointment for many to find out that there is no big mystery. There's really nothing to figure out at all. Narcissists can also seem magnetic because they are emotionally unavailable in the extreme. And this can trigger people's wounds around not being seen and heard, which causes them to keep trying to make the narcissist see them and hear them and care about them. It's a subconscious attempt to address these wounds by trying to achieve a different outcome in a similar situation. That is sometimes known as repetition compulsion. For example, if someone felt unseen and unheard by an important caregiver in their life, when someone in their adult life is also emotionally unavailable, this can trigger a very strong desire to address that by getting this person to see them and hear them and validate them and care about them and choose them. There is often the idea that once this can be achieved, then the narcissist's deep well of emotional treasures will be unlocked and shared with the person. This is a fantasy from childhood, and it's often coupled with a cognitive distortion called heaven's reward, which is where people believe that the harder they work or the more they suffer, the bigger the reward is going to be at the end. But there is no treasure trove here. There is no reward with a narcissist. What you've already seen is basically all there is to this person. A not so great act that is covering up complete emotional chaos and arrested development. An emotional toddler who walks around pretending to be an adult and many times doesn't even do that very well. Nothing exciting or mysterious here at all. Many people find it too difficult to accept or to believe that that's all there is. They feel that there must be more to this person and they can waste years trying to find it. The reality is that what you see is what there is, and that is basically nothing. That's the biggest way that narcissists are boring. There's just not a whole lot there. And once you've seen this sort of main act a few times, there's really nothing else of interest to see. They don't have much to talk about. They're not really curious about things the way that other people are. They aren't usually that great at conversation with other people in general. They're not interested in other people. They actually don't seem to have very many interests or to be interested in very much at all outside of themselves. It's just the same complaints or hard luck stories or bragging or heroic tales or superficial chatter over and over and over again, all starring the narcissist. People in relationships with pathologically narcissistic personalities often find themselves literally bored silly. This could sound trite or even unimportant compared to the suffering that these personalities are capable of inflicting, but when you add it to the amount of gaslighting and abuse already happening, it becomes much more damaging. People need stimulation. They need connection. They need to bond. They need interaction. But when you're dealing with narcissistic personalities, you may very well find these things very hard to come by, especially as the relationship goes on through time. Far from the intense love bombing and whirlwind chaos narcissists are notorious for, many narcissists are not interested in interacting with the people around them at all after a while. They choose instead to stare at their devices, to play games that are just designed for one person, to stay physically separated from those around them, and just generally to not interact. This can be very damaging for young children of narcissists, for example, who need their parents' attention, as well as for spouses and other people who have been isolated from others at the narcissist's instigation and have no real or meaningful interaction with anybody else. Bids for interaction or connection with the narcissist are often met with hostility and aggression because narcissists typically find even basic interactions with other people very stressful, and because they tend to resent any encroachment on their time and space by other people. Anything you ask them for is too much, and people are often viciously attacked and shamed just for doing that, just for asking the narcissist to spend time with them, or just for trying to initiate a conversation and have some interaction. After this happens enough times, people stop trying to interact with the narcissist, and many have long since stopped interacting with other people because it's not worth the problems. Shame can also have a lot to do with people isolating themselves from others as well. However it happens, people can find themselves left alone with a narcissist as their main or even only source of meaningful human interaction. Even in the best of times, the positive interaction with this type of person is often very limited. They just don't have much interest in other people. Talking to a narcissist is like talking to a person on TV who cannot see you or hear you. No matter what you say, they just continue on with their performance and saying their little lines and acting out their little role. It's the most frustrating, uninteresting thing in the entire world. Even if narcissists are interested in interacting, and even if they are inclined to behave appropriately during the interaction, it's still often very superficial, very one-sided, and can turn ugly very fast, making it impossible to ever enjoy it or to even relax. There's no trust here whatsoever, not even basic trust that this person will remain the same character or persona from one moment to the next. Nor should there be any trust in this regard, honestly, because there's absolutely no guarantee that that will happen. Any positive interaction with a narcissist is generally spoiled by that. More often, though, the general interaction with narcissists vacillates between vicious arguing and fighting or being completely ignored, especially as the relationship goes on. You can sit with a narcissist for hours, and if you don't talk, there may literally be not one word uttered. Even when you're ostensibly doing things together, interaction is often limited or non-existent. Unless you're arguing, of course, and even then, even the arguing may fade away to something that only happens occasionally, leaving people in situations where they are completely ignored, as if they're a piece of furniture. People sometimes say this is because narcissists are not worried about trying to impress people after they've already secured the relationship, and there is truth to that. But it's also because of what we've been saying here. They just don't have very much to offer. They're very, very limited. There's nothing really there for people who are not completely, totally brand new to the relationship or the situation. People who are not brand new to the relationship or to the situation have already seen all the razzle-dazzle. They've heard the sizzle. They've smelled the steak. Those things brought them into the restaurant. They sat down. They were told that the steak was available. They ordered it, and their order was accepted. Now they want to eat it. The problem is they can't eat it. They can't eat it because it doesn't exist. There is no steak. The sizzle and the smell that drew you in are the closest you are going to get. And when people start wanting to eat the steak, when they start wanting a real relationship from the narcissist, this is where everything falls apart. They can't give you the steak that they offered because there actually isn't one. So they either try to keep you around by promising that it's coming eventually, or they shame and attack you for wanting to eat it. Either way, you don't get it because it doesn't exist and it never did. They have nothing to give you. People sometimes interpret this sizzle and the smell to mean that there had to be a steak. There had to be a steak. I heard it. I smelled it. There has to be one, which means that the narcissist has the ability to produce, but they're just refusing. This is where the belief in the treasure trove and the attempts to convince the narcissist to share their emotional riches that we were just talking about earlier, that's where that comes from. This is false. The implied or perceived appearance of something does not translate into a reality of the thing. A mirage in the desert looks like water, but you can walk until you drop, and that water will never get any closer because it's not really there. It's a combination of factors creating an illusion that there is water, and this is enhanced by our own thirst. We believe, and often continue to believe, that there is a steak, in large part because we're hungry and we want there to be a steak, not because there's any real evidence that there ever was one. Narcissists are aware in their own way that they don't have anything to offer other people. Most of them don't seem to realize how limited they actually are, but they do seem to be aware that a real relationship is not going to work for them. Which doesn't matter anyway because they don't seem to really want one. They find actual intimacy threatening and scary, and the idea of reciprocity is not just frightening to narcissists, but it makes them angry. The idea that they should have to give anything in order to get something triggers an infantile entitlement, probably based in the fact that they don't actually have anything to give, and they know that. If people are required to give in order to receive, then narcissists are essentially cut right out of that equation from the jump, which means they can't get anything. They tend to feel that this is unfair somehow, and it makes them angry to be required to do anything. They do, however, need other people in order to function, hence our metaphor about the sizzle and the smell of the steak. They need others to come around and stay around, at least for a little while, and the promise of the steak is how they achieve that. We can see this in the way that they will almost never actually admit that there is no steak, even though they very clearly know that. Instead, they pretend it's coming soon as you do this and wait for that and jump through this hoop and hop over that hurdle and climb this mountain and swim that river. Or they attack and shame and berate you for wanting to eat it while at the same time insisting that they really were going to give it to you. At no time do they ever just give you the steak, and at no time do they ever just say there isn't one. They continue this fatal balancing act of pretending it exists and it's attainable, just either not right now or not for you personally. It's the same worn out magic trick over and over and over again. It doesn't take very long at all for this to get really old, and that's why it isn't nearly as effective on people who are not new to the situation. Narcissistic personalities are aware of that to a degree. They can see that it's not as effective any longer. That's why they stopped bothering. There was never anything to give you in the first place, and you are no longer satisfied with just promises that the aroma and the sound are going to lead you somewhere. So why waste any effort on you when you have already learned that you're never going to get to eat? If you're dealing with a boring narcissist who suddenly becomes the life of the party or the kindest person in the world or the most helpful elf in the room around other people, try to look past your initial emotional reaction to this and see what there really is to see. You've already heard all of these stories. You've already seen the depth of their, quote, kindness. You already know what strings are attached to their, quote, help. You've seen what this person really has to offer, and the truth is, it's not very much at all. The people they're currently performing for don't know that yet, but you do. Don't let it bother you. It's not worth it because in the end, it's always the same. The traveling circus eventually folds up its tents and moves on, and this sad one-dimensional clown is left behind, waiting for another circus so they can suit up and begin their act again. Same paint, same act, same result every single time. Don't take their failure to try to perform for you anymore as meaning anything about you. It doesn't. It means their worn-out bag of tricks has been exhausted and they can't adapt to that, so they just try to ignore it. Take it as evidence of their inability to actually engage with anybody on even a basic, genuine level, because that's what it is. At the bottom of it, narcissists are all sizzle and no steak. If you're in the situation where this person has become your main or only means of interacting with other humans, there's no other way to say it. This needs to be changed immediately. Humans do not do well in this kind of environment at all. It can cause extreme stress reactions in people. This kind of boredom is oppressive and even dangerous. Find things you can do that interest you, people to talk to. Even just small talk and surface banter can help. Find a therapist, a group, an online community. Go to the park. Reconnect with family members or friends if you can do that. Do something. Don't let this person shrink your world down to just them, because you will be in it alone. Their world doesn't include you. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via Messenger, and through Skype and Zoom for clients worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, and seminars multiple times throughout the year. So if you are interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I have several books in publication. You can find them on Amazon and littleshaman.org if you would like to get a copy. And if you would like to join our support group with access to exclusive content, weekly support meetings, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com, Transrelational Healing, and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to the Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.